This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Hello, one and all, to episode 20 of ThROH The Years, the podcast where two people, sometimes three, review Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. And why I had to add that caveat is I just realized that my two-person entrance wouldn't work because we have a returning guest. Because in addition to me, Trevor Dame, and him, Matt Feuerstein, we are having not only the return of our first guest, but he becomes our first ever repeat guest because we are returning to Boston, so we are returning to Joe Gagne. So, ladies and gentlemen, the host of 5-Star Match Game, the host of Joe vs. the World, the host of Joe Gagne's Fun Time Pro Wrestling Arcade, and those can be seen on voicesofwrestling.com, thecubsfan.com, and youtube.com, respectively. It's Joe Gagne.
Thanks, guys. Do I have to read the statement about the deep state from Sinclair Broadcasting? I don't agree with any of this.
Yeah, I feel like I'm glad that you brought that up. I should introduce myself as well. I'm some guy, and
Feuerstein, the creator of this show. Come on.
Oh, please. Oh, please.
List them and learn, host and creator.
Yeah, I feel weird about the whole ROH thing. It's like, because it's this show, can't help but promote ROH in some way, and Sinclair owns it, and Sinclair is really bad, but that doesn't mean the wrestlers in ROH are bad. So what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to boycott it? What should happen? I don't know.
It's tough because I am not a fan of not trying to do anything and just whitewashing everything, but at the same time, I realize that not only am I not going to agree with the views of the ownership of everything I consume, but I realize that, Sinclair's doing some, I'll say what I find to be ethically sketchy things, but it's tough where to draw the line because it's not like Vince McMahon is a great person or quite a lot of people in wrestling. Or, I bet you some of the people that own Nabisco and make Oreos aren't the greatest people. So it's harder to ignore when the stories pop up right in your face, I would say.
Yeah. The Sinclair stuff is a little bit on a kind of different level as far as insidiousness than a lot of the other stuff we've seen in terms of actual damage they're doing right now. But again, Does a boycott punish them? A boycott of ROH, or does it just punish the people involved in ROH? I don't know.
But I
say I prefer my Ring of Honor non-problematic and owned by Rob Feinstein.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the other frosted tip elephant in the room would be Rob Feinstein and his history, which we will have to get to a ways down very carefully.
Yes, it will come up. It will be unavoidable.
Might have to mention it. Yeah.
Yeah. At least we could argue that in 2003, most of us didn't know that about RF, whereas now, we can't really plead ignorance on Sinclair. But I have not come to a full decision on how I feel about the situation. But I felt like since the Sinclair really became a big story on the internet, since our last episode came out, I feel like this was a good time to talk about it. Since you brought it up, I figured I would throw that out there. Fun way to start the show, guys. No problem. That's what I'm here for.
I'll say this. The good thing about this is obviously this is a free podcast, not affiliated with Ring of Honor in any way. And we're covering shows that, as far as I understand, I don't think they've really put them even on their streaming service. And from what I've heard, their streaming service might not be a safe buy even at this point because, that's the funny thing. They're owned by Sinclair, but yet they don't seem to give any of the resources. It's like the forgotten about little arm that's stuck away from everything else.
It's like early WCW, but to the extreme.
Colt Cabana was not forced to read a statement about fake news. So they're almost exempt. They're just forgotten about. They're the cheap programming that fills all their affiliates at 11 and 12 o'clock at night. So
Well, is if one day we see Boris Epstein doing backstage interviews at ROH, we'll know that Sinclair is fully encroached.
Now, entertainment that is produced by people who are of good, unquestionable moral character would be the fine podcasts at the Place to Be Nation Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network.
Stretching a little there, but yeah, we'll go with it.
Hey, they're my bosses. You comply. But actually, I got 2 new debuting shows to plug this week, both that just came to my attention within the last few days, so great timing, actually. Who Booked This is a new podcast on the network hosted by J.R. Goldberg and Stephen Graham, and every episode is just going to be them talking about either a weird match or a horrible match. I listened to their debut episode. It's only like 48 minutes while I was shopping today. And they just devoted a whole episode to the first ever Punjabi prison match between Undertaker and the Big Show. A lot of laughs were had. It was a very enjoyable way to spend mostly driving and buying horrible headphones I'll have to return. But so that was fun. And then the other podcast I would like to plug that's a new addition to the Place to Be network is Wrestling Warzone, the Monday Night Wars, which is a new show by JT Rosero and someone we know, Matt, Chad Campbell, who brought us to the network.
Our favorite guy.
They're going to be covering Raw and Nitro each and every week from the beginning when they start going head to head.
Yeah, I am excited for this podcast. I have to admit.
Yeah, for everyone that is a fan of the old, where the big boys play, Chad Campbell is back into the chronologically retelling WCW past business, just in a new format. So it's great to have him back there. So yeah, that's the plug section of the show.
And I should let you both know now. I for dinner tonight I had a burrito. It had lettuce in it. I'm not sure that it was romaine lettuce, but if I die during the show, blame the lettuce.
Yeah, for those who will be listening to this in the post-apocalyptic future of 2024, lettuce was a green vegetable we used to have that occasionally got tainted with E. coli, and so that's what Matt's talking about. Mm. But
it's how I died.
It's normally at this point in the show we would talk about the news that happened between shows. The 2 major news things that behind the scenes things that happened concerning this event really happened during the event, so we will get to them later. But there is one piece of housekeeping I think I would like to talk about, which is, Matt, last episode we talked about Iceberg's second and final match in Ring of Honor.
Speaking of lettuce.
And we talked about that, and it was just I think we just both agreed it was just a simple squash, but it was panned at the time as this the worst match in Ring of Honor history, and the crowd did crap on it, and I at least on my behalf I assumed that's why he never showed up again, but unfortunately I didn't find this in my research before the last episode, but I just happened upon this a few days ago. Gabe Sapolsky actually tells his plans for Iceberg, of all people, in an old MySpace blog. So I will just quote Gabe here.
Wait, just before you quote this, did you literally just find this on the Wayback Machine?
I was searching for something. I think I was searching for a story about Steve Corino or something, which we'll get to later. And for some reason, the old Gabe MySpace blog, someone had quoted a post in a message board, and there was this, of all things, a blurb of Gabe talking about Iceberg years and years after the fact.
You are an amazing researcher, I have to say.
Well, this was just happenstance, but this is Gabe talking about Iceberg. Gabe writes on Iceberg, "I was firmly committed to giving Iceberg a monster push, similar to the way Abyss was pushed, but Iceberg was going to be more violent. We just couldn't reach a financial number to make it work for either party. I knew it would be a hard sell on the ROH crowd back then, and it would take some time and effort to get over, but I really believed in it and thought Iceberg could grow into a unique presence on the shows." So, Gabe actually, it turns out it was not just them souring based on the crowd reaction. Gabe really wanted to push him and was aware it would probably be a hard sell that would take time, but apparently it was just a money issue, according to Gabe. So that shocked me quite a bit, actually.
I wonder if Iceberg regrets kind of not being able to come to terms with ROH over money, because his career, I imagine, would be different if he had a big run as a top heel there.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's interesting that, you would, the way they talked about, they even booked him like, oh, we're just scared of Iceberg. We didn't really book him. He just showed up. That was almost like an in-joke of, we really don't want him here. But according to Gabe, it was just the opposite, where he was so into him. He was like, even though this is going to be a hard sell, I was committed to like really pushing him. So, yeah, I guess it just goes to show you can't judge like a book by its cover or a lettuce by its size. It's just different stuff. But
I think you can judge lettuce by its, or at least its firmness.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the firmness, because sometimes the core, like you think you'll get a nice big thing of lettuce, and then there'll be like a lot of the bitter white pithy core will be like 2/3 of the lettuce. So, listen to Joe's second statement. Judge it by its firmness, not its size. Folks.
So what we're trying to say is next time we decide about why Iceberg's career was how it was, we need to go up to Iceberg and just kind of squeeze him.
Squeeze him for information.
Okay.
Because unfortunately we will not be able to squeeze Daniel Bryan for information as we were hoping, because he's probably staying in WWE.
Aw.
Sad.
But also, yay!
Yay, he's
back.
Hopefully okay.
Yeah.
That brings us, I do not have a long, arduous segue for this one, to Night of the Grudges, which took place on June 14th, 2003, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, back at the National Guard Armory, in front of a crowd of 600 fans, one of those fans, which was Joe Gagne. And Joe, if you have anything during the show to add from a live perspective, obviously, just chime in addition to the thoughts we will be asking as a home rewatcher. But one thing to get into off the top is, when I was doing my research through the newsletters for this show, a couple weeks, I think, before the show happened, Dave Meltzer reported in The Observer that Ring of Honor was expecting to break their all-time attendance record on this show. And for those who don't remember or haven't been listening to every episode of this show, in which case, shame on you, the all-time attendance record was 700 fans in the Elks Lodge. This show drew a reported 600 fans, which I think was about what they drew on their last show in Cambridge, or at least what they reported as. Obviously, sometimes the numbers might be a little upsold, but guys, like, looking at this card, do you think they had any right to think they would break their all-time attendance record? Because on paper, I think this show is about on par or maybe a little less enticing than the last Cambridge, Massachusetts show. Like, I don't know why they thought they were going to get a big bump here.
Well, there were no titles on the line and no kind of special guests. The whole thing was kind of built around grudges, some of which were intriguing, some of which weren't. So no, I wouldn't have thought like, oh, this will be a blockbuster for sure.
I guess it's just like that. ROH just had momentum, and so the brand became more popular. But I will say, as far as the lineup, Paul London against AJ Styles at that point probably was incredibly enticing to the sort of fan that would go to ROH, more so than a lot of matches. I will just say one thing. The one downside of the new lighting, where it's darker in the arena or building or whatever, is that you really can't tell that the crowd is bigger. Whereas at the first anniversary, it clearly was a bigger building, more people. This just looked the same as everything else because you really couldn't see the extent of the crowd. And sometimes it's cool when they have a bigger than usual crowd to be able to see that on screen. Well, not a huge problem, but something I noticed.
Yeah. Go on, Joe.
I was going to say, this was my first show with the new lighting, and to your point last episode, I think it really did enhance my appreciation of the show. And I had been going to ROH shows since the start, and I certainly would have kept going, but, the nicer production values, it made for a more entertaining live experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can definitely see that. I mean, going to Matt's point, I guess the problem is, like, by making everything uniform with the dark, and just the selective lighting and mostly the crowd in darkness, it kind of evens everything out. Where if you're having a show in a bad-looking building in a small crowd, that it's a benefit that everything just looks uniform. If you're having it in a big crowd in a nice, historic building, it's a negative impact. And that's a problem Ring of Honor struggles with to this day, because they just had their biggest show in company history, drew about 6,000 people, and a complaint from fans was the way they lit it and set it and shot everything. You would have no idea as a home viewer that it was much different than any other Ring of Honor show, when it was by far the biggest, most attended Ring of Honor show in history. So that's one problem with making everything uniform.
Yep, I agree with that. But yes, overall it does enhance the live and also the video experience. Just seems slicker, it seems cooler, it seems a little edgier. It doesn't just, and it looks like its own thing as opposed to just any random indie that you go to.
But yeah, this was the first show outside of Philly where they brought the lighting setup to a non-home base. And there was also 2 showcase matches on this release. I don't think they were they recorded? Were they at this show or just saved from a previous show?
I can confirm they were at this show. There was a third match that was not released in any form. A showcase match between a man named Flatliner and a man named Thorn, I think, which I have not seen results of this match anywhere, but I'm pretty sure I didn't make it up. I have my original show report from thecubsfan.com some 15 years ago, but I can confirm all these matches did take place, because one of them tied right into the actual main card itself, kind of.
Yes. We had Lit beating Jimmy Cash in 1:28, and we had Dunn and Marcos and Slick Wagner Brown taking on Angel Dust Slugger in Lit, with the winner of the fall getting into a 4-way later, except, as we'll explain later, not really. Angel Dust won. He pinned Slick Wagner Brown after Slugger hit him from behind with the body bag. Both these matches were on the release at the end, kind of placed weird, where they were sold as bonus matches on the DVD that came after the last actual main card match, but before the promo. So if you wanted to not watch these matches, as I actually skipped these, you couldn't just turn off the DVD because you still wanted to see the end of show promo. So you basically just had to skip forward to get to the promos. It was something different from Ring of Honor.
So on the DVDs, by the DVD logic, Slick Wagner Brown's debut was in the main event of Night of the Grudges.
It was the main event of the showcase, and I actually like that match a lot. That's actually a pretty fun little match. If you have the time, I would definitely go back and watch it.
All right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would not expect that. But then again, I do like Angel Dust, and I do like Dunn and Marco. So, there's half the guys in that match right there. But what we all see, though, starting the show, the DVD proper, is Paul London backstage going over some of his Ring of Honor highlights, including the Michael Shane ladder match, the 3-way with Styles and Low Key, the Epic Encounter match with Bryan Danielson. Paul says he thought the ladder match was the best match of his career until tonight, where he faces AJ Styles one-on-one. He mentions that AJ is the newly crowned NWA heavyweight champion, which we will talk about more a little later, and says that even though the belt isn't on the line tonight, beating AJ here would be another notch up on the levels of greatness. He says he knows he can beat AJ because he's done it before, and tonight he's going to win the #1 Contenders Trophy and go on to win the Ring of Honor title. The only real interesting thing I thought I took from this promo was after that one show where Paul London became this charisma-filled, wacky heel, he is right back to, white meat babyface here, with no explanation. Just straight ahead, kind of stiff Paul London babyface promo.
Which is interesting because that's not totally how he works in the match.
Yeah, it's... I don't know when Ring of Honor learned that Paul London would be leaving and how that affected their plans, but it feels, like they were going in one direction and they've kind of just grabbed hold of the wheel and shifted course a little bit again.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a good point. I think it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just on a match-by-match basis, which character makes sense for which match build-up. Who knows?
Yeah, so next promo is we cut to AJ Styles and Alexis Lurie somewhere else backstage. AJ is holding the Ring of Honor tag title and his newly won NWA heavyweight title. AJ motions to the NWA title and says it's another trophy to add to his collection. AJ says that London did beat him in the past in Ring of Honor, but it was a three-way where Low Ki had already stunned him with a key crusher. AJ says there's no Low Ki tonight, and he's going to beat London and then add the Ring of Honor World title to his collection. AJ Styles, the original belt collector. So, and that brings us to the first match on the show. The Carnage Crew of DeVito and Loc taking on and defeating the Christopher Street Connection of Buffy and Mace, escorted to the ring by Ariel, who I think was making her Ring of Honor debut here, and the Carnage Crew win in 8 minutes, 41 seconds, when Loc pinned Buffy after DeVito hit him with a top rope moonsault. Joe, what did you think about this as a way to start the match, and were you the fan who got a very deep kiss from the Christopher Street Connection before the match?
I was not. I think I am briefly visible in that GIF you posted. It was funny because I brought a friend with me who was just a WWE fan, never really been to independent wrestling, and this is like the first thing he sees, and he turns to me, he says, "What did you take me to?" Which was a valid question. This match had some, I kind of get a kick out of the Christopher Street Connection giving these Archie Bunker types the business, and I thought the commentary had some just weirdly laughable lines, like when I forget when Gabriel, Chris Lovey, I think, was speculating if Ariel likes girls, and he adds like me at the end.
I actually can remember this. I think she's gonna be leaning toward the female side, just like me. It's like, oh my god. Oh my god!
Kiss, and they implore like, "Oh, go to the hard cam," and it's like you're not in the Georgia Dome, like you're in a rec center. Like we'll still be able to see everything. As a match, it wasn't a whole lot, but it was short, and that was that.
Matt, there definitely seemed to be as we've gone through this journey, it's a step up the commentary, but there definitely seemed to be still a lot of, now it's gone from homophobia, like overt, like hateful homophobia, to more just, haha, they're funny, but we gotta tell you a lot that we like girls, and we're gonna hit the strip club after, and like, we're straight, we can enjoy this and still be straight. Like,
right?
Did you have any takeaways from this match other than that?
Well, first of all, so since they're baby faces now, a lot of fans were kissing Buffy, and gay or not, no matter what the genders of the people involved, I have to think that just kissing a bunch of strangers on the mouth in a row is not the most sanitary thing you can do. I mean, I guess people kiss strangers all the time at like bars and clubs and stuff, but I don't know, just seeing somebody just like kiss a bunch of people on the mouth in a row, regardless of their gender, I don't know, it's probably not, it's not sanitary, I don't think, but hey, I guess it's part of the fun, living on the edge a little bit. There was a lot of gay baiting spots in the match. Just the straddle cover and butt grabs and spanking, and at one point Doug Gentry on commentary was like, "This is ROH, not Cinemax," which I thought was a very good. kept it in time, and then. There was a moment right before DeVito like beat the crap out of Mace, where he's like, "You want to be gay, motherfucker?" and then just beat the crap out of him. It's like, yep, very I don't know, very barbaric, I guess is how I would describe it. But yeah, I mean the Christopher Street Connection again are entertaining. The Carnage Crew are a pretty good tag team. So as far as like moves and stuff. They try to go for a double team pump handle, but Mace falls over, and Gabe goes, "Oh, very nice counter by Mace." He just dropped down. So Gabe has still not quite mastered the art of covering for botches, because he'll just like try way too hard to act like it was on purpose. So Loc covers Mace, and Mace kicks out. Buffy comes in the ring, and Loc says, "Get the fuck out of here!" And Buffy yells, "I didn't do a thing to you, bitch," and the crowd went crazy. I actually like that a lot, because just Buffy is just a really good delivery. He's literally like, Loc just like looks over and he sees Buffy standing just in the corner, and he's just like, "Get the fuck out of here," and Buffy just yells, top of his lungs, "I didn't do a fuck to you, bitch." I just enjoyed that Very, very much. I had to say it twice. So Buffy gets a hot tag, lots of clotheslines, Bronco Buster by Mace. Then they both, the Christopher Street Connection, they kiss mid-ring, and both announcers act like 12-year-olds, because of course they do. Gabe Asher on Loke, and DeVito breaks up a spike pile driver. Christopher Street Connection kisses both Carnage Crew members, and then DeVito pins Buffy with a moonsault.
It's funny how far we've gone in wrestling where, back then kissing another guy was the most shocking, horrific spot ever. And 15 years later, the Young Bucks would do the thing where they hit the ropes 100 times and then kiss Adam Cole simultaneously on the cheek. And that's a babyface spot to a big reaction, and no one acts like it's a big deal.
Yeah, but if two guys start making out in the middle of the ring, I don't know that the reaction would be all that much different. I hope the announcers would treat it differently at the very least. But I
look forward to that spot in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Oh God! All sorts of politics today.
Oh man.
Speaking of problematic, though, the post match.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I actually, believe it or not, have a couple of thoughts on this match. First off, Matt, when you said there was a lot of clotheslines in Buffy's comeback, I almost laughed because one of my notes here says Buffy's hot tag is entirely clotheslines. There is nothing but clotheslines in his hot tag. That's the only thing he knew to do. I agree that the Christopher Street Connection are really entertaining, but I do feel like their act, it doesn't have a lot of staying power. They do the same stuff. This was just the Whitman sampler of the Christopher Street Connection. Every single sexual spot they've ever done. Kisses, ass grab, testicular claw, Bronco Buster, the crawling over top for the straddle pin, as you said. Just every single thing. And so it was mostly a little bit of basic wrestling and then just every jokey gay spot. It almost felt like a throwback to the first year of 2000, the early 2002 Ring of Honor shows.
The big difference being that they're faces now.
Yeah, yes. And I did like that after they won, and before we get to the after-match thing, that's even more of a throwback. I forget if it's Doug or Gabe, but they say something this win proves that the Carnage Crew, they not only win their Christopher Street Connection feud, so there's that weird Ring of Honor thing again where they always have to proclaim when someone's won a feud. But they said this proves that the Carnage Crew can work any style. What style of match was this?
They can work basic opening match comedy style, which is kayfabe terms, not a style. I don't think.
Exactly. After the match, the Carnage Crew then get Ariel and do their second rope spike pile driver on her for no good reason except just to do it. And I guess that explains why they actually did not do the second rope pile driver, which is their normal finish during the match propers, because they were saving it for Ariel. The crowd chants one more time, and the Carnage Crew tease doing it a second time, and then Loke flips off the crowd and they leave to lots of boos, so they will not give you it a second time. Ariel's sole purpose on this show was to get Spike Pile Drive. There was no other reason. There's nothing else she did on this show. This is the end of a feud. I don't believe she had managed a Christopher Street Connection before. This felt a lot like the first few Ring of Honor shows where I'll say, Matt, I've appointed the last few shows to be our man-on-woman violence referee on the close calls. This was not a close call. This was right back to the as clear-cut as you can get, very forced, we just got to have one of these on every show style man-on-woman violence moment.
Yeah, this was a lot. And also, heels doing it to a babyface, and the crowd giving it the second biggest babyface reaction of the night, which we'll get to the first one pretty soon. But yeah, I really wonder when they're going to stop. Do we want to take guesses on how many shows it's going to be until something like this does not happen?
I don't know. I know Joe, and I had to apologize because I had missed Joe on the first episode he guest on said it happened at the next two shows in Boston he attended. I mistakenly thought that, misinterpreted that as the next two Ring of Honor shows, period, but it was the next two Boston. So we know, because Joe tipped us off, that the next Boston show will have man-on-woman violence. So, Matt, you're basically asking, do we think they will break the streak before they return to Boston?
Yeah, that's pretty much what we're asking. I think no, but I don't remember. This is just a guess. I think the streak will continue unbroken.
I have to agree. And Joe, were you one of the people cheering in the crowd for this pile driver? The younger, you can admit if you did, the younger, 15-year younger Joe Gagne, who liked young thrills like man-on-one pile driver.
Oh, God.
Absolutely. I have the written proof in my show review. I was disgusted by this, but only because of the low stakes and possible low payout that some poor person would take this punishing move. Not so much the gender issues, but still.
Yeah. And again, it was just so I guess blatant in a way that it hasn't been for a couple shows. Especially when you realize, again, Ariel is literally just out there doing the Alice in Danger gimmick of the colorful. I guess I hate to say this, but there's no better term for this. Hag, the woman who pals around with gay people.
How do I bleep on Audacity?
Look, Matt, this is a Will and Grace reboot world. I'm not saying it with malice. Gay people are just as good as us, often better, certainly in terms of taste in clothes. But that is just the best way to describe the character she was playing, and only playing to get attacked by men.
Bleep.
Okay. One day we should save all the things you've had to edit out because of me, and a couple from you.
I've had to edit a couple things from me too.
Yeah.
And by the way, think of that sentence for a second, and you might know what I had to edit out.
So next we have a match that kind of surprised me when I was looking up the results, because it is Chance Beckett in his one and only Ring of Honor match taking on Matt Striker, and Matt Striker defeats him in 11 minutes 13 seconds when Striker made Beckett submit to the Striker lock. So before I hand it over to Matt for this one, you might not, people who listen who don't have a lot of knowledge of early 2000s indie wrestling might not know who Chance Beckett was. He was a guy who, this was probably right around the high point of his career, because shortly before this match, which would be his only Ring of Honor match as far as I know, he had gone to the finals of the Super 8 against Paul London. And so I imagine that's probably what got him this booking. This match, we'll get into our individual opinions in just a second. I'll say that in the Observer, Dave wrote from the crowd report, the lone match on the show that did not get over was Matt Striker versus Chance Beckett, making his Ring of Honor debut, which the crowd turned on without even giving them a chance. And I don't think Dave was aware of the pun of that, but but the other, and then finally the last thing I'm going to say before I turn over to Matt is, so I was trying to do some research on Chance Beckett with the usual stuff. You go to cage match places like that. His hometown is Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. I live in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. I have for 2/3 of my life. I think he's been on a show I've seen. I did not remember Chance Beckett. So I feel guilty about saying that I should know him, but it seems weird. My city's for those who don't know, probably it's 7 hours from Vancouver, probably only a population of 120,000, maybe 200,000 if you consider the outlying areas. And so this is probably one of the most famous athletes to come from my city. I mean, there's been a few, no, actually, there's been a few other athletes, but had no idea. And
so he's in the top 25 most famous athletes to ever come from Kelowna, British Columbia. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely in the top 25. And Matt, did you feel like the crowd did not give this match the chance it deserved? Wink, wink, chance.
Well, I actually thought that at the beginning the crowd was into it. I actually made a note that the crowd, has really consistently been into the Matt Striker like pure wrestling openings lately, and this I thought was no exception. I think that Striker is sort of at this point carved out a pretty good niche for himself as like the pure wrestling guy on the show who does a pure wrestling match, every time out. And I think the crowd is excited for it. The announcers also, they make a point to say that he's in the top 5 because the top 5 this time was like the first spot is vacant because there's a match tonight for the number 1 contenders trophy between AJ and London. Then Daniels, London, Homicide, and Matt Striker rounds out the list at number 5. So I think they've actually done a pretty good job with top 5 at this point. I don't know if you'd agree. Like, it feels like it means something, which I didn't remember actually, because usually when they do stuff like this, it falls away pretty quickly. And I actually think this is actually, the top 5 has actually lasted longer than I thought. It's been a few shows, and it actually feels like it matters. I don't know if do you agree with that? That the top 5 feels pretty good?
I kind of disagree. Like the top 5 makes sense, and they've stuck with it. But like I'm never remembering it. I'm never thinking like, oh, that's going to get him up to spot number 3 tonight. I just
but
and it's never like I don't know. There's just something about it that it's not memorable. And
well, I don't know. Has any promotion really ever done the thing with their top list where it's actually like memorable?
Well, even WCW didn't really it wasn't memorable when they used to do the WCW top 10. And they were a company that had the advantage that indies don't have, which is you have a roster that is guaranteed exclusive to you.
Yeah.
That's the TurboGrafx 16 top 10 to you.
Oh, nice. I did not remember that sponsorship.
Me neither. Although we think about early 90s WCW and TurboGrafx 16 are a perfect match.
Yeah. But as I said on other shows, I'm one of the few people left, I think, that's still a sucker for this like Matt Striker style where they're doing the reversals and the quick, takedowns and sit outs and all that stuff. I just like it. When it's like smoothly done. It's just, I don't know. I just think it's fun. I didn't think that Beckett really was able to hang with it. He didn't look quite as smooth with the counter wrestling as some of the other guys did. He does a dragon sleeper and Striker rolls to the ropes. They do a test of strength, which you do not see too much in ROH. Striker gets the advantage, but Chance bridges impressively. Like Bryan Danielson would do the bridge out of the test of strength, and Beckett does that. And Striker tries to knock him down, and he doesn't get knocked down. Beckett rolls out, turns it into a neck breaker, which is kind of cool, but so he's continuously whipped into a tree of woe, and Striker drop kicks him in that position. So the crowd starts to get quiet at this point because Beckett locks on a chin lock. Eventually, the crowd starts chanting for Striker. You also don't see too many chin locks in 2003 ROH if you think about it. I don't know. I actually can't think of too many matches where you have chin locks at all. Beckett no-sells chops and goes for a pile driver, but Striker backdrops him. Beckett blocks the Striker lock and grabs a reverse cloverleaf. Striker reverse, and that's sort of like a callback to the Chad Collier stuff because Chad Collier uses the regular cloverleaf. Striker reverses out into the Striker lock. Beckett struggles to the ropes, but eventually taps. I just thought Beckett didn't look very good, but Striker still I enjoy Matt Striker. I didn't think this match was particularly good just because I thought Beckett felt a little bit clunky and unsure of himself, maybe a little bit nervous, I don't know. But I thought the crowd did give it a chance, but I thought that I did think they definitely lost them.
So, Joe, what did you think? And do you have any other experience with Chance Beckett other than this match?
No, this was the only time he ever made it to a New England area. And Cage Match doesn't have him wrestling a whole lot longer after this.
No.
As for the match itself, I was surprised how little Beckett got to shine. Like, he would hit a big neck breaker. I'm thinking, oh, he's taking over. And then 30 seconds later, Striker would be back on offense. And Beckett locked on a submission move. Like, oh, big moment. But Striker just gets out and then taps him out with a trailer hitch. And I kind of appreciated the parallels they tried to draw between Beckett and Chad Collier, who'd given Striker problems before. There were moments I liked. It didn't really come together. There were some moments of awkwardness. Like, I think Beckett tried to, a knee in the gut when Striker was coming off the ropes. He just fell over. I wasn't sure who got hurt. It just never really coalesced like you'd hope.
Yeah. something that me and Matt have gone through the last couple shows is I think Matt Striker is a very polished, competent, quality wrestler in some respects. I think I'm not quite into his mat work as Matt is, I think, because
we have between Matt and me and then the mat work, we have all the Matt in common, so I think it makes sense that I would like it.
Yeah. I mean, the Matt trifecta, there's only one Matt for me in my heart, and it's already taken Striker. I'm sorry. And work.
You're talking about Matt Thompson.
Exactly. Feuerstein, who? It's only Thompson.
The editor, senior editor of The Atlantic. I don't know. Matt Thompson.
But I feel like that's a nice esoteric reference. I feel like Striker's work, it's just a little too unfocused. Like, he rarely, in a match like this, he's not really trying to tell a story, but it's all, like, it's very technically proficient how he does it. And this is something I'm probably, I'm the one that's on the outside looking in on this because, as Matt has said in the past and said here, like the crowd has patience from the crowd, enjoys him. I think the crowd, like Matt said, is looking forward to him now as kind of like the replacement Danielson of hooray, like we're gonna get some technical wrestling when Matt Striker comes out. But about this match, I think Joe hit the nail on the head. I was surprised how little like high impact like signature offense Chance Beckett got. Like, this match got a solid amount of time, but it actually felt like it was missing almost all the offense you would expect from Chance Beckett at the end of the match. Like, in the last few minutes, he got to hit like very little of anything memorable at all. Like, I feel like the people's opinions of this match would be a lot different if it was like 2 minutes longer and had whatever signature moves Chance Beckett can do in it to make it more of a back and forth exciting final couple minutes, because it had the solid usual build up apart from that weird knee to the gut miscommunication spot Joe mentioned. But like the only memorable move I can remember Chance Beckett doing is a slingshot where he held onto the leg and transitioned into a single leg Boston Crab. And he did almost nothing else memorable. Like, I'm looking at my notes. I wrote, his selling is solid. He got fired up when he got chopped once. He had a good neck bridge. Like, very little. And I don't know, again, I don't know whose fault that is, obviously, because I was not in the match. But it was definitely weird because it feels like most Ring of Honor matches where a new guy comes in, if it gets 10 minutes or more, the guys usually work it to make sure everyone gets a chance to shine. And I don't know if Chance Beckett had it in him to shine, but it didn't even feel like he got the chance here.
Again, it's very hard to not pun with Chance Beckett.
I don't even realize what I'm doing.
And now, in ROH, especially at this point, I assume there was nobody really like laying out matches with the wrestlers besides the participants in the match. Is that true? It's pretty much just the guys doing it for themselves. They say, this is your spot, this is your time, and then they just figure it out.
Yeah, I think so. Especially like maybe the closest they'll get to a road agent in the coming years is like, I think there's reports of wrestlers who would go over things with Ricky Steamboat maybe when he would be backstage. But I don't think they really had an official, I don't think Gabe was micromanaging them like a road agent would.
So you'd think that Beckett would be like, hey, let me get some of my stuff in.
Yeah. Again, it's weird, and I would assume that this performance is what got him to not have another booking again. Although maybe next episode I'll come back and I'll find a different Gabe MySpace blog where it turns out Chance Beckett was going to get a monster push before he wanted too big of a payout. So
check Friendster this time. You never know what gems lie there.
Oh God, we got some. We are bringing our A+ game on the references today. TurboGrafx 16, the Atlantic editor. I mean, we're killing on, if nothing else, best reference episode yet.
Yay!
Next up, we have a 4-corner match. Homicide defeating the debuting Chris Sabin. Not the debuting, but the second Ring of Honor match of John Walters, and the debuting in Ring of Honor Justin Credible. Homicide wins in 13:57 when he made John Walters submit to his inverted STF, like kind of leg tied thing that he made Punk submit to. Although this time he didn't do as much of an STF, he just kind of grabbed Walters' head and pulled back on it. So going into the start of this match, this was supposed to be the one of the showcase pre-show matches we talked about, Angel Dust was supposed to win his spot into this four-way. Angel Dust starts to come out, and he gets laid out by a surprise debuting Just Incredible. Dave Meltzer and The Observer wrote at the time, well, they, and they being Ring of Honor, know that anytime a named guy shows up unannounced, it's an easy pop. This was said to have been a shocking reaction and one of the biggest pops in company history. Now, when I read that, I thought, whoever's telling you that, Dave, is full of shit. When I watched this, at worst, it is the top 3 or top 5 pops I have seen in Ring of Honor so far, and it might be the biggest pop. Like, it's up there with the end of a couple of those big Danielson low key, like the first couple of matches they had, where the 3-way and the singles match. I could not believe how loud and nuts this crowd went. For no offense to him, but for Just Incredible. Like, Joe, being there live, do you remember how loud this was?
Oh, my original note says, you would think Dynamite Kid came out, stood out of his wheelchair, and agreed to wrestle in the match. Like, people just went completely nuts for this. And I think it goes to the benefits of a surprise, because if they had just advertised Just Incredible, people would have been like, eh. But the fact that he just kind of showed up unannounced with his theme music, he made a surprise appearance. He cut a promo in the ring. Well, poor John Walters was just hanging out on the outside because he came out first. I felt bad for him.
He said fuck, which the crowd really loved.
Oh, yeah. And I like how later on said, oh, that's first, Gabe said, that's the first ECW chant you've heard on Ring of Honor, because everyone else imitates, but not us. But you got to pay respects to the legends. So I don't know if that's true. There's never been an ECW chant before. That feels wrong, but I'll take his word for it.
There might have been one when Tommy Dreamer showed up, but I think in general, Gabe is right. But I agree. Like, Gabe was pretty defensive of just the idea of like it was his excuse to get a little shiv in on the XPWs of the world and basically be like, well, okay, you might hear an ECW chant now, but normally you wouldn't. Like, just Gabe just getting his little needles in where he can. But so yeah, for the match itself, this is getting to be a habit, but I thought this was like these 4-ways. Most of them are the same to me. They're not bad. They're not good. It's the same stuff where they adhere to tags, then trade off, and then there's a big dive train. In the final few minutes, everyone forgets about tags, and they all start just hitting near falls and breaking up pins, and then the match ends, and you never remember it. Like 5 minutes after it's over, you forget it ever happened. When I was thinking about this match the other day, about how many these 4-ways, I think I realized these have to be like the ultimate booking crutch. And that sounds a bit meaner than I mean for it to come off. But like, you could put a debuting guy in the match, and if you put him in with a couple established guys, you don't have to worry about the match dying a death. And you can put a couple established guys in the match like they did on the last show, Punk and Daniels, and hype. Ooh, Punk's going to confront Daniels without giving away a singles match. Like, I imagine if I was a booker, these 4-ways would be so tempting because they help fill out the card, and you don't really give away anything. But I am not into them. They feel so disposable, and they don't even feel like a stylistic like role the way scrambles do. Because with a scramble, it's always like crazy spot fest. With the 4-ways, it's always just kind of just middle of the road and a wild last few minutes. So I can get into a bit more of details after, but I've yapped enough. Matt, what did you think about this match, like, as a whole? Am I being too hard on it?
I wouldn't necessarily say you're being too hard on it, because everything you're saying I agree with. I think I might mind the fact of that a little bit less than you. Like, I think it's okay to just have an unmemorable, but fairly, exciting, logic-free match with some big names in it every show, especially considering, booking for the live audience. I think it's probably a highlight for the live audience, even if the matches aren't particularly, special. So I don't think anything you said is not true. I just maybe mind that a little bit less. But there were some, amusing parts of this match, though. One early part was when Doug said on commentary after Credible came, "What an incredible addition to this match," as far as not noticing puns that you're making. Then there were some cool moves. I'm trying to just look at my. Oh yeah, so Walters did an STF and J on Homicide, and J Train's on the outside going, "That's a chokehold," which I just think is very funny coming from him. There was this really cool spot where Walters did like a tornado divorce court, which is like an arm DDT. Walters did some cool stuff. Walters hit the lung blower on Homicide, and the crowd actually popped this time because I remember noting on the last show that when he hit it off the second rope, nobody really seemed to care, which I thought was weird because that's a pretty cool move.
Yeah.
But the crowd actually was into it this time. Another thing that I enjoyed was Gabe foreshadowing later angles because he mentioned that Justin Credible was wearing one of those controversial Jinx shirts.
Very controversial.
I was very happy to have that reference back again. I also noticed that Justin Credible's jean shorts were straight out of 1996. There's no way that the way Justin Credible dressed in this was even close to cool in 2003. So that's another thing that made Justin Credible fit in perfectly well in ROH, I guess. I don't know. There's a spot where like Walters had like a surfboard on Sabin with like pulling back his arms, and Homicide came in and to add extra pressure, and then Credible came in and super kicked Homicide to the outside, and then they kind of went into their whole dive thing, and I thought that was a pretty fun spot. Walters hit this like power bomb into a DDT on Sabin, which I thought was pretty cool. Credible hit a That's Incredible on Homicide and it got broken up, and then Homicide was back in like really quickly. That's one issue with this match. It's like that's the guy's finisher. It seems to be a devastating move, and it really wasn't sold that much. And then the finish came pretty quickly after that. So yeah, I agree with you about the match. I just think that that's fine. I guess that's sort of how I feel about it.
Joe, I got your first impression on the reaction. Do you have any more thoughts about the match itself?
Well, I know last time I complained about guys just kind of tagging out of four-way, like not caring, even though it could cost them the match. There seemed to be more of an emphasis on that because Walters and Homicide were in for quite a bit to start until Sabin kind of snuck in a tag, and then Walters had to tag out because he was in a lot of trouble. And I appreciated kind of that a bit more move towards logic. Of course, things just kind of went all haywire at the end. But yeah, none of your complaints are wrong, but this was a lot of energy, and I totally didn't mind it.
Yeah, I think one of the live reports said, sorry, man, I'll get to you in a second, said this was the second best match on the show. I don't know if I would put this ahead of the next match on the show, but obviously some people liked it. Yeah,
and one other thing I put in my notes. After Homicide won, the crowd booed. And Gabe, of course, does his awkward explanation thing where he's like, well, that's because he's from NYC, then they just beat Boston. But the crowd does like Homicide. Just want to let you know. They like him. It's just, NYC beating Boston. I always love it when he trips on himself.
Also because that was a case where, like, the truth is a much better, like, just say, this is John Walters' hometown, Like, why can't you say that? Like, oh, they would normally cheer Homicide, but this is John Walters' hometown. Like, why have to make up this weird, like, it's because the Yankees beat the Red Sox? That's such a weird, way to go. That feels like something that Vince would tell you to say over a headset.
Yeah, in Toronto or something.
Yeah. This is Bizarro World fans. I don't know why they're booing Homicide here. He's the best, but he's a big dog. The only other thing, I guess, that's the one other impression I was left from this match was I wouldn't say they should have called an audible, but it definitely felt like the way the match went kind of went against the natural inclinations of this particular crowd because John Walters was very over because it's his home area. And in fact, anytime that John Walters is not wrestling for an extended length of time, there's this portion of the crowd that starts chanting, "We want Walters." And yet he's the one that ends up taking the fall to Homicide, who's the baby face that you want to really put over and probably rehab after the Joe loss on the last show. But yet, instead, it ends up getting him booed because he just beat the hometown guy. And likewise, Justin Credible gets this huge reaction. Justin Credible, I don't think, wrestles for the first 4 or 5 minutes of the match. And when he does come in, the very first thing he does is get punched in the face by Chris Sabin and spit a giant loogie in the air.
Yeah.
And Justin Credible actually doesn't do that much in this match. Like, he gets a few spots. But I thought it was just funny where maybe they weren't expecting John Walters and Justin Credible to get such big reactions. But, like, knowing what I know now, if I was, booking out this match, if he was allowed to do it, I would have had maybe Chris Sabin take the fall and a little more just incredible rather than, have the two most over guys, one not be in it that much, and two take the direct loss to the big baby face.
I think that's a fair point. Of course, you can't have Homicide losing, as you know, because he'd be losing to a bunch of noobs.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was two other options, but no. Yeah, but although it would have been weird if he beat Credible immediately.
Yeah.
And also funny was, not funny, but Gabe doesn't really make many WWE jabs, but I always get interested when he does, knowing now that he's working with them. And he said something here like, Credible's probably he looks pissed off. He's probably pretty pissed off about the 2 years of his life he wasted in WWE because Credible had just come from the WWE. And every time I hear one of those comments now, knowing where Gabe is now, where he's like, this isn't sports entertainment or stuff like that, I'm just like, oh, Gabe.
Isn't it sad how Gabe is wasting his life right now?
I feel for him. After the match, the camera follows Homicide as he walks back through the curtain, and we see him celebrate with his street crew, Julie Smokes, and I didn't quite recognize the other guy. Some of those guys blend together for me. Low Key is there as well. Even though he's not wrestling, he's still injured legitimately. He's backstage, and he's pissed that Homicide is hanging out with, his street boys again. Homicide says he needs his crew there to be his backup, and there's a little bit of tension between Smokes and Key. Key walks away, and Homicide tries to, to call him back. He doesn't want him to walk away angry, but Smokes tells him not to worry about it, and then they talk about going to a strip club.
I like this. I like this storyline. I like the tension. I think Loki's doing a good job. I think it adds intrigue. I don't think it really pays off very well for various reasons, but I think that it's a good idea, at least.
Yeah,
that was Loki's only appearance on the DVD, although not the actual show itself, as we'll get to.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, that's actually another great reason to have Joe on. Is there's something we'll get to that was in the live reports, but not on the show at all involving him. I agree, Matt. This is a really good angle, and I think it says something to the quality of 2003 Ring of Honor. How we've really been in love with it the last few shows, that there's going to be a big angle tonight that ends and completely fizzles out, and they got another big angle going on with this low-key Homicide Smokes 3 love triangle that will not really have a resolution, and yet we're still praising 2003 so heavy. There's so many good things going on that angles can go nowhere or have no real good resolution, and it's still there's still a lot of other good stuff on the show. So
yes, and of course, both angles fizzle out in part because some of the main people that those angles are built around have issues that cause them to not appear on shows.
Some very different issues. But,
yes.
We go to the next match, the end, I believe, the main event of the first half. Gabe always believed in you want to have a main event before intermission, a pretty big match, and then you kind of start from scratch after intermission and build up again. So almost like 2 mini shows. So this would have been his main event of the first half. No disqualification tag match. BJ Whitmer and Raven taking on the Second City Saints of CM Punk and Colt Cabana. Punk and Cabana win this match. When Colt pins BJ Whitmer after hitting the Colt 45, they win in 16 minutes, 49 seconds. Before the match starts, Punk gets on the mic and he cuts a promo very similar to the one he cut on the last Ring of Honor show, where it's Punk starting to feel his anti-hero oats a bit, where instead of just calling down everyone in the crowd, he asks his supporters to throw up the X with their arms and, praises them while he calls down the rest of the people. Punk says his revolution will destroy Ravens, and he also compares himself to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
Yes, I guess Malcolm X does have an X in his name, and I think he was straight edge. If you think about it.
I believe people probably said throw up the X in the olden days, but there was probably a different audience with a different implication.
Right.
Raven gets on the mic to respond. He says the last time he faced Punk, he made a mistake. He was happy. Now he says he's miserable, and he's bringing all his hate and loathing with him. Raven tries to do his long, sometimes a choice is made for us, and sometimes there's no choice at all catchphrase, but a Punk fan heckles him during this. The Raven fans chant loud and overpower the Punk fans, though. And then we get Raven's usual, welcome to Raven's Clockwork Orange, House of Fun, quote the Raven, nevermore. Raven, at this point, his promos are almost more catchphrases than non-catchphrases. It's like 60% catchphrase because they're so long. But as for the match, Joe, what did you think about a kind of match you didn't see much of in Ring of Honor at this point, or maybe at any point, more ECW-ish crowd brawly type of match? What did you think live?
I didn't see much of anything because they were brawling away from my section. Sometimes you'd hear a chair clang or you see someone's legs go in the air as they got body slammed, but that's about it. So thankfully the DVD filled in a couple of the gaps there. I really like the crowd brawling portions. The way they bookended it as kind of a normal match was a bit odd. I almost wish they kind of just went all out in that regard. I just want to say how much I really like the Colt Cabana CM Punk pairing. I think having a goofball as one of Punk's lackeys is just, I don't know, I get a lot more out of that than if it's just like a Luke Gallows or something, similar serious mindset.
Exactly.
It's just like when Colt tries to do the dancing double team elbow and Punk is like, what are you doing? And I don't know, stuff like that just it resonates a lot more with me.
Matt, what did you think? Especially, we've seen now a couple of these more Raven-style matches where I think you see a lot of his fingerprints on them. What did you think about this one compared to, say, the last tag we saw from these guys?
These matches continue to surprise me in how much I like them. I legitimately thought this was great. There's just lots of drama, good crowd heat. I was just very, very impressed. There's always the funny stuff during the Raven promo when a guy in the crowd yelled "fuck you" to Raven, and Gabe was like, "Oh, it must be one of those straight edgers." I enjoyed that. Always like pulling out the funny stuff.
Not a guy who doesn't like smoking a bowl like us, right, Doug? The usual Gabe stuff.
Exactly. Now, Gabe calls this on commentary the greatest feud in ROH history, which it's like you could make that argument, but not at this point, right? I almost wonder, did he record this commentary much later after several other shows that happened? Because
I thought that was weird too, and also the Ring of Honor's only been around for a little over a year, and for some of that time ran one show a month. It's like if a baby said this was the best meal I've ever had, and they're 4 months old. If a baby could talk,
yes, baby. Yeah. So maybe even at this point, it was still the best match in ROH history, just because they had promos and stuff. Yeah. But no, I really enjoyed it. Gabe keeps calling Punk a man of integrity, even though I still feel like he cheats a lot. I don't know, but there's a chair shots to the head, of course, which is. I think it's just going to have to be something that we just accept happened back then, because or else it's going to be hard to watch any of these matches. But I don't know. I just thought it was a lot of good drama. Like you said, the fighting in the crowd was really cool. Then back in the ring, they do settle down into a regular match with the Saints kind of working over Whitmer, and the crowd is cheering Whitmer on. And I thought Whitmer did a good job, and Cabana was punching at his cut, which I know that you always enjoy, Trevor.
Yes.
And then he takes out Raven as he tries to get back in. So they actually do a good job with the regular tag team stuff, too. And then, let's see with some other highlights. So Punk goes for a second rope Rana, but Whitmer moves and Punk Rana's Cabana. And I was like, okay, that's different. Raven gets the hot tag, fires up, takes out the Second City Saints with knees, hits a bulldog, clothesline combo on the Saints, drop toe holds Cabana through the ropes, hits the Raven effect on Punk, just like that, which I think weren't they trying to build that up for a really long time?
Yeah.
And they just out of nowhere, he just hits it, and Cabana pulls Raven out of the ring. So I guess they just decided, let's forget about that whole Raven effect thing and just move on. Whitmer top rope headbutts Punk, but Cabana pulls the ref out of the ring after 2. So I guess then they say it's no DQ and there's no code of honor in the match. Whitmer Exploder 98's Cabana into the ring, but there's no ref. Punk hits the Shining Wizard with the chair into Whitmer. Still no ref. Raven throws the ref into the ring, and the delay allows Whitmer to kick out. Cabana hits a Colt 45 on Whitmer and gets the pin. I just thought really good drama, fast-paced. I don't know. I was impressed. I've been impressed with this stuff.
I thought this was good. I think all these Raven matches so far, they've surprised me too. I think they've all been consistently like just right solidly good. Like not even, the above average. Like just none of them have been something I would put on a year-end list, but they've all been good. And part of me wonders if I'm enjoying them more because I haven't seen much ECW in a long time, because like these feel like very classic Raven ECW matches where you can see the layout. There's lots of bells and whistles and storyline moments and different elements to it. But yet in ECW by the end, like fans were getting really sick of those Raven matches. But here, maybe it's just because they're so, you don't see matches like this in Ring of Honor. They seem fresh and like it works on me. And maybe there will come a time later in this year where I'll be sick of them. But so far, I haven't hit that point. I find them fun because they're completely different from pretty much everything on the show.
They have a lot of personality, which is different from a lot of matches also.
Like, going to... If the Chance Beckett Matt Striker match felt like a match that needed a road agent, like, Raven's matches always feel like they've been very deliberately plotted, but in a good way. Like in this match, it starts out immediately with Punk stomping a mud hole in Raven, but Raven immediately gets revenge and does the same to him. Like they have a Punk, as you've said, Punk hits BJ with a hard chair shot. Colt does the same to Colt. Raven does the same to Colt, and then they have a chair standoff. But then Punk runs away like a chicken. Raven chases him to the back, pulls Punk back, and now Punk is bleeding like a very big gusher blade job, which might be one of the pictures. I think there's a smile he gives at the end of the match covered in blood. That might be the picture for this episode. But like all those beats, you can almost in your mind imagine like Raven plotting each of those beats out, like telling Punk, we'll do this, then we'll do this, then we'll do this, then we'll go brawl in the crowd, And it felt very ECW-ish, like all of it, in a good way, right down to like Raven even getting the crowd members to hold on to the garbage can so he can smash Punk into it. Like, yeah, that fan brings the weapons vibe to it, even though that wasn't this match. The thing that bugged me was the thing, Matt, you brought up, which is for since the start of this feud, they've been building as the central point of this feud, almost on par with the fact that Raven hasn't pinned Punk, which is he hasn't hit the Raven effect DDT. In promos and the matches, that's been the story, and that's something I really liked, especially about the last tag match they had, was they built the whole story of Punk hits it on him, Raven can't hit it on Punk, but what's going to happen? One day Raven's going to hit it. And here, Raven just reverses a move, like I think an Irish whip, hits it with barely any like warning. Like he just raises his arm to the crowd and immediately hits it. It isn't the finish. The crowd doesn't react. The announcers don't really play it up big. And I was just really disappointed because so far this feud has had really good attention to detail, and they built it up and just gave it away for nothing. And that was such a weird... I didn't expect that to happen, and I was not enthused with it. The other thing I didn't like was the last minute or two of the match is basically Punk and Cabana double teaming BJ and taking him out. And you don't see what takes Raven out of the match. Like, Raven, I think, gets pulled out at one point, and Colt's on the outside with him for a while. The camera never cuts to them, and Raven's too slow to make the save. And it just felt weird that, like, I felt like you needed some better, like, on-screen justification for why Raven was, like, completely out of the last couple minutes of the match. But we never get it. Yeah, though, I thought this was a good match. These Raven matches keep working. I think the crowd liked it. The crowd that could see it, maybe. But also, another thing to note is Gabe does a little bit of foreshadowing for the second straight show. He says, didn't Punk say something about his old man before he cut off on the mic at Do or Die? And they're actually, teasing a promo Punk will cut on the next show, which will be one of the most remembered CM Punk promos pre-WWE that he ever cut. And it's interesting that for 2 shows now, Gabe and Punk have been foreshadowing it. Like they're almost treating this promo like a match, like it's something to be teased and then built to. So
yeah, that's a cool thing, and then obviously it pays off. So
yeah,
it's good.
So fun ECW-ish type match. I thought it was one of the best looking Colt 45s I've ever seen hit. Mm-hmm. After the match, we Punk beats down Raven and BJ with a chair, and then he puts Raven through a table by doing a top rope leg drop to the floor through a table. Crazy spot.
The announcer's like, "You went too far," and I'm like, "That's not even the craziest table spot we've seen so far tonight." But hey,
yeah, I mean, it's funny again. Like it's crazy to see that Raven's basically playing the Tommy Dreamer role in this feud so far, where he loses the match and he gets put through a table. He hits his finisher, still can't win. Like he's showing a lot of ass so far in this feud, taking a lot of abuse. Backstage is intermission, and Gary Michael Capetta is with Matt Striker. Capetta puts over Striker's recent wins and says, "How you doing, bro?" Or should I say, "How you doing, brow?" Because Matt Striker has the unibrow.
Yeah, I'd say Gary Michael Capetta, he has his charm, but I never thought he was very good in this ROH stuff. I don't know what you think.
It's weird because I actually agree. Like, he's charming. It just feels like Ring of Honor is supposed to be this cutting-edge promotion, and Gary Michael Capetta feels like your grandfather or your uncle, like, who's also there. And he's good at being Gary Michael Capetta, but it seems like a bit of a slight mismatch, I would say.
Yeah.
Stryker said he heard a couple people chant "Fear the Brow" tonight, and maybe it's the power of the brow helping him rack up all these wins. Stryker says that recent wins against Tom Carter and Chance Beckett have been like winning in the playoffs. Okay. Gary and Stryker go over his next 2 Ring of Honor matches. One against Tom Carter in a tap-out match, which actually won't end up happening, and another against Chad Collier. Gary says, "Any match, my money's on you, buddy."
Both of those matches don't happen. Just for the record.
Oh, yeah. Jeez.
The promo build-up for Punk paid off. The match build-up for Stryker did not pay off twice in a row.
So they're really starting to build Matt Striker up. Like, he's getting these promos. I think he got a promo on the last intermission, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. But, he's starting to get a little bit of promo time, and he's getting these undercard wins. So the Striker train is starting to roll, and we'll see how BJ Whitmer helps him derail it in some time.
Spoilers.
Gary throws to the second half of the show, except Prince Nana walks in and interrupts. Prince Nana is back. He says he's back, and he's going to go back in the tag division with a partner, although he doesn't do it tonight because we come back from intermission and get Prince Nana taking on and defeating Diablo Santiago, escorted to the ring by his old tag partner Oman Tortuga. Prince Nana wins by pinfall in 2 minutes, 15 seconds after he hits his elevated DDT. Before the match, Prince Nana walks around the ring, tells the camera to focus on a fan who he calls, quote, "fat and disgusting," unquote. That was maybe the most memorable point of this match. It was.
I think Nana's wedgie he had by the end was probably the most memorable part.
I have another memorable part too.
Okay, Matt, what's your memorable part?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I was legitimately happy to see Prince Nana. That guy's got spunk. So here's the thing. Here are the things that I wrote. First thing I wrote was, well, this is surprising, because I did not look at the back of the DVD box, so I did not know this was coming. And Diablo actually has the offense for the first minute or so. Then Nana suddenly takes over, and Gabe on commentary goes, "People think it's a gimmick that he's a prince. In ROH, there's no gimmicks." And I just wrote, in response to that, I just wrote, "Gabe." Gabe, come on.
I picture you drawing the eye-rolling emoji on a piece of sheet paper.
Basically.
Just
how does he say that with a straight face at this point? Is it supposed to be ironic? I don't know. But, so, butt splash, implant DDT. Yeah, something implant DDT is cool. I thought it was interesting that they decided to bring him back as a wrestler because at this point they've moved so far past him. And obviously I know that he became much more successful in ROH as a non-wrestler. So I was surprised that he ever really even had another run as a wrestler. But hey, whatever. At the end, he sidewalk slams Oman Tortuga onto Diablo Santiago and hits a backsplash onto both of them. So he's a wrecking machine.
That was actually the most memorable thing that he did, and it was happened after the match.
Yeah.
But I would say, this is the awkward teen years of Prince Nana's Ring of Honor career, because you remember his early days when Ring of Honor was trying out a million things, and you remember his days as a manager, and you forget, I forgot too, they just brought him back in 2003. It's weird. It seems like there isn't a fit for him at this point as a wrestler.
I wonder if they already knew that he was going to be a manager and they were going to transition into it. Honestly, I don't know.
At this point, it looked like they were trying to sell that he was going to go back in the tag division. So,
right.
Yeah, that never went anywhere, did it?
I don't think so. But then again, I don't even remember him coming back. Maybe I'm forgetting an incredible. The tag titles are going to switch a lot in 2003. Maybe I'm forgetting a Towel Boy Prince Nana 2003 comeback run or something. I don't know. But Joe, do you have any other possible thoughts about a 2-minute Prince Nana squash?
We've spoken far more than I anticipated.
Okay, so yeah,
there are no gimmicks in ROH, none.
So yeah, as Matt said, after the match, Diablo and Oman comes in to check on Diablo. Nana lays them both out. Next match, the SAT of Joel and Jose Maximo defeat Special K of Dixie and Mikey Whipwreck, scored to the ring by a lot of people, including Becky Bayless, in 10 minutes, 38 seconds, when both of the SAT pinned Dixie after they hit a Doomsday Device DDT on Dixie. Matt, before I give it to you, I'll just note, Doug Gentry really stressed during this match that this was not a scramble match. He got mad when Paul Turner wasn't calling for tags. He said this is not a scramble match. Matt, was this a scramble match?
Yeah. So let me think of some things to say about this match. Well, first of all, it was very sloppy. I know this might be surprising to some people, but there was some sloppiness in this match between the SAT and Mikey Whipwreck and Dixie. So early on, Mikey badly botches a head scissors, but he recovers with a Rana. So wheelbarrow slam by Joel into Jose's knees on Dixie. They do the Boston Crab Camel Clutch combo on both members of Special K. Jose does a running drop kick to Mikey's face. I'm just basically going to list moves because that's what it was, where he runs back and forth a few times. And Doug goes, that's more running than Rob Feinstein does at the gym. And then Gabe goes, that's more running than Joel has done in the ring in the past year. And I just wrote, geez, Gabe McMahon.
For some reason, they really go after... Well, I know why, because, Christopher Daniels, we talked about after that match he and Morgan had against the SAT, said that the SATs really needed to work on their cardio. And it seems like right around the time of that match, Gabe started making little, he's the fat one jokes, or he's the heavier one, or jokes like this. He's getting his little jabs in.
Yeah, I don't like when he does that. Because first of all, who the hell are you? As I've said before. Second of all, just that's the stuff that you want ROH to not be like, right? Where you're they're not so obsessed with or start talking about guys' appearances and stuff, and kind of bullying them in public to be to get in shape. The ROH is supposed to be the anti that at this point, but Gabe is very much like that. So Mikey does a pair of leg drops over the top rope. Special K does a double gut buster. Then the match calms down and the crowd pushes Jose to hot tag Joel. Dixie goes to sunset flip Joel to the outside, but Jose stops him, which allows Joel to hit a Maximo explosion, which is an air raid crash, to Dixie on the apron, and the crowd went nuts for that. That's kind of a crazy spot. Special K attacked the SAT, allowing Mikey to hit a flipping senton onto everyone on the floor. This is the first match where Mikey didn't seem like the old man. Not that it was great, but he started to kind of fit in a little bit more, and which makes sense because he's very young here, and he's always sort of positioned as the wily veteran. And so Mikey hits a double arm belly to belly on Jose for 2. Jose hits a tornado DDT on Mikey for 2. Then Dixie comes in with no tag, and And there's 4 power bombs, no release by Joel on Dixie. Mike gets a top rope Rana on Joel, followed by a whippersnapper. By the way, I want to note this, because it's something that people have not talked about much. Isn't it weird that Mikey Whipwreck's finisher was the Stone Cold Stunner at the same time Stone Cold Steve Austin was doing it? Like, that's bold, isn't it?
It wasn't like, wasn't the Chart Buster by Disco Inferno Osol basically the stunner? Like,
yeah.
And the Ace Crusher from Johnny Ace, like...
Well, the Ace Crusher was first, right?
Yeah,
yes.
But, Johnny Ace, so
yeah.
Not really.
Sorry.
I was just going to say Mikey Whipwreck holds victory over superstar Steve Austin, so I think he's earned the right to steal his move.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just weird to think like you're just doing the top guys, like the most famous wrestling move in wrestling history, probably. It's probably the Stone Cold Stunner, right? The one that like people like to do on each other more than any other move. And this another guy's just like, yeah, I'm gonna do it too. That's gonna be my move, and I'm gonna call it something different. But anyway. There's a Doomsday DDT on Dixie for the 3 by the SAT. Not terrible. There were some cool moves. The heat was pretty good, but it was very, very sloppy. So that's pretty much what I'll say about that match. It was a scramble.
Joe, I want your thoughts on this match, but I also want to know, before the match, Mikey Whipwreck he grabs a box of Special K cereal from someone at ringside, and at the start of this match, this is something that even the commentators acknowledged, the ring is covered with something. I'm going to assume it was Special K cereal. Live, can you give me, since you were there live, can you tell me what you thought of this match, but also what was covering the canvas of the ring?
I can't quite cover that. It looked kind of powdery, but I guess it could have been kind of crunched Special K.
Cocaine.
Well, if only these kids are so talented. If only they'd get their heads straight.
Yeah.
I tend to forgive sloppiness in kind of a grudge match setting because you don't want you would expect kind of tempers to flare and things like that. But I guess that's more of a brawling style and not intricate spots they were trying to do and just messed up. So there were some cool moves, but this was a scramble match, and I thought the Doomsday DDT was a hell of a move. I don't know why they kind of kiboshed the Spanish Fly, because that's which is the move of 2018 going by WrestleMania, and it's nice that their move name has carried over to that. I don't know why they abandoned it, because it's usually the biggest pop they'd get, but some good stuff. But it was a SAT match.
Yeah, I am a little bit lower on this match than you guys. Not that you guys are raving about it. I thought this was a little worse than a normal scramble match. I don't know. Mikey Whipwreck was fine, but I wish some of the other Special K guys were in there instead. It was a little bit worse version of the scrambles I'm used to, while Doug Gentry kept telling me this was not a scramble match. Didn't feel like a grudge match at all. I also thought it was kind of, funny, not necessarily a laugh riot, but like, Mikey Whipwreck is the guy who trained this SAT, so you think, wonder what he's going to do in the ring with the SAT. And the very first thing Mikey Whipwreck does in the ring is a tilt-a-whirl Rana that he botches with one of the SAT, and I thought, ooh. But, it was just a slightly subpar scramble. I do think that Maximal Explosion on the apron, it's always crazy to see a big apron spot, like before apron spots became the norm and the hot thing to the point where they happen frequently in WWE now. There's another funny little bit on commentary where Doug Gentry says if Special K cleaned up, they'd do so much better of a job. And he says, look at the announcers. And there's been a couple jokes on the show about Doug Gentry cleaning up. So, little line, maybe that was something recent going on in Doug's life, but there's a couple jokes like that during this show. Another weird commentary bit is Gabe and Doug don't recognize who Becky Bayless is. They're like, she's in Special K's entourage, and they go, who's that girl? Like, they point out that they don't know who she is, even though they called her out by name when she was part of Homicide's entourage during the Homicide's gang during versus Steve Corino's group storyline. So, one of those weird moments where they are relaunching Becky Bayless and are now forgetting that they know who she is. So, not much else to this match. You guys still with me?
I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good. So after the match, the Special K do a really shitty beatdown on the SAT. Carnage Crew runs in, they attack Mikey. Gabe says this is to get revenge from Mikey costing them a match at Epic Encounter. Mike is able to make a brief 1-on-2 comeback until Justin Credible runs in and attacks him to another big pop. Logan DeVito introduced Justin as the newest member of the Carnage Crew group, so that explains why he was wearing that controversial Jinx t-shirt. Pretty weird to think that you always think of Carnage Crew as a tag team, but Gabe even reminds us they still have Masada. So at this point, the Carnage Crew is a 4-man stable. Like, it's pretty weird to think about at this point, but
there's at least one match where they all wrestle together.
Yeah. Next, before the next match, we get a graphic that just tells us that the Field of Honor tournament is coming soon.
It reminded me of like a very old school, like, Oz is debuting. Like, I kind of liked it. You don't see that much in modern wrestling.
Yeah, I like that. Especially, I like that they didn't explain it even. I just like that they announced something, and it's just like Field of Honor, and you're like, what's that? And
Gabbo.
But next, we got something that's a little bit better than the Field of Honor turn. Just a scooch better. And that would be the number 1 Contenders Trophy match. Paul London versus AJ Styles. Goes to a draw after a double pin in 24 minutes, 12 seconds. Now, I am going to gush over this match once again, but first I want to go over a couple things. The first thing I want to go over is the story of this match is, you would think, why did they do a double pin for a number 1 Contenders match? And I'll tell you why. I'll quote from The Observer. The original plan for this match was to put Paul London over and to build him up for a match with Ring of Honor champ Samoa Joe. And also end the show with London doing his spectacular shooting star on Styles after presumably a great long match. When Styles won the NWA title a few days earlier, which Ring of Honor wasn't aware of until hours before it happened, it forced a booking change because Styles, as NWA champion, couldn't job on an indie show. Since Styles also couldn't win because it would set up a match with Samoa Joe that Joe, the Ring of Honor champ, couldn't win, and they still wanted to build for Joe versus Paul London, Ring of Honor decided on a double pin draw. The feeling was because the bout was going to have a flat finish, they put the 6-man tag in the main event slot. The bout ended up going 25 minutes and apparently was an excellent match that stole the show. And the finish wasn't even flat. They were supposed to go even longer, but Styles ended up with a tooth loosened from a shot, and he got it back in place, but wanted to go home before it was knocked out. So that's the first big story of the matches. It was, and that leads me to the other thing I want to mention first, which is, let's just go over how cursed this feud has been. So let's go over the history of this feud. AJ Styles and Paul London, were both feuding with Xavier at the end of 2002. They wrestle in a 3-way with Low Ki at the first year anniversary show to get a shot against Xavier. Paul London wins. He loses to Xavier. At the end of that show, in a segment, I think AJ Styles asked Paul London, let's form a tag team and go after the tag belts because those are held by the Prophecy at this time. It's a great, simple thing that makes complete sense. It's these two guys were after the Prophecy's world title. They both lost, but they can still get revenge if they team together as a tag team and get the tag belts. So they were supposed to win at, was it Expect the Unexpected, I believe. And except Paul London no-shows the show. Well, doesn't no-show. He has the sinus infection that is so severe he needs emergency surgery. And so instead, Ring of Honor books Amazing Red, and they still go through with the tag title victory. So basically, Red takes London's spot. AJ and Red win the tag titles from Xavier and Christopher Daniels. So then they worked up this storyline where Paul London is going to turn heel. And they're going to do a match at the Round Robin, the show that was originally Round Robin Challenge, before it was called that, where it was going to be Paul London finding a partner, a mystery partner, and taking on AJ and Red for the tag belts. Except AJ gets hurt on that night. They have to, again, change the card, make it into a 3-man Round Robin Challenge. So then we get to tonight, and this happens. So this feud was just almost every match that would happen in every step of the way was changed. So that's the first weird thing. Do you guys have any thoughts first on the background of how weird this all is? Or am I the only one who thinks it's really weird how this has gone on?
Well, I mean, it's amazing to me. Like, you're right about all that. It's amazing to me, though, still how well this all came off in spite of that, which I guess is what we'll get to now.
Yeah, I thought this match was just great. I'll just go a little bit in my thoughts right now. I thought the first half of this match was like just a lot of back and forth trading of stuff, and they kept doing a lot of handshake spots, and there was building up some tension. And then the second half of the match is London working over AJ Styles' leg, but in really inventive ways. Like, he does an axe kick to AJ's leg as it hangs over the apron. Or when he does a shooting star press, he doesn't try and hit AJ's full body. He just wants to hit the injured leg. And even a lot of the times, he does a couple submissions on it, but he does things with a real snap. It's mostly just him hitting the leg. And it all plays great into the finish where AJ hits a Styles Clash, but he lands on his knee naturally as you would with that move. He's too hurt to make a cover in time. And then later when he hits a German on Paul London, he can't bridge up because his leg hurts so much. He can only do a one-leg bridge, so both their shoulders are down, and that gets you the double pin finish. But really, this was just... It was a great match that actually told a story in the second half, but had lots of good one-upmanship. I thought the pacing was just right. You know, it wasn't like always breakneck every second, like craziness. But these two guys are just so good at what they do. And it had a little bit of everything, I thought. Like, Joe, what did you think live of seeing this match?
Live at the time, I thought this was one of the best live matches I had ever seen personally. And 15 years later, and probably 100 wrestling shows since, it's still up there. It's so good. It literally, like, checks so many boxes in terms of storytelling and selling and having that play into the finish and having, like, cool creative moves. And, you know, I think... London catches AJ's leg for a kick at one point. AJ tries an enziguri, but London just kind of spins and dragon screws the leg at the same time, which was awesome. I mean, the work was like, AJ just annihilates him with a discus clothesline at one point, and it was just so good, and it still holds up completely. And it's a damn shame. I don't think that these two ever wrestle again in any form. I kind of don't think they did, which is just a shame. Because this should have been like, something we saw 10 incarnations of.
Matt, I had a feeling you liked this match, but how much did you like it?
Well, I loved it, but it's interesting. For one thing, it's weird to think that for many years there was kind of a conventional wisdom about AJ in certain quarters that he was not a fully formed wrestler in the same way some of these other guys were, in the sense that he maybe was a little bit too spotty, that his selling wasn't that good. It's so weird when you go back and watch this stuff and think that anyone ever thought that. Because obviously now AJ is considered one of the greats. But, he was always one of the greats if based on the stuff that we've watched. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and the thing that really gets to me is, like, people just always assume, like, AJ was just a flippy high flyer. And we see lots of those in, groups like Special K. I thought, did you notice, like, I think Joe mentioned it a little bit, like, how hard AJ was hitting Paul London on some of this stuff. Like, AJ Styles, not only was he, like, a more complete wrestler than people gave him credit for at the time, he was, like, a secretly, like, not quite low key, but he could wail on you even at this early age.
Yeah, in ROH, he was always a devastating striker.
Yeah, like he's doing some like sweat flying like blows to the chest and stuff.
Yeah, and it's great to see like a good match between two veterans who really know their stuff. But it's also like there's something about watching two precocious young guys with something to prove and a lot of physical talent trying to do an epic match, because they can do things that the veterans really can't do. Like they can combine some of the great like the ideas with the physicality that you just can't do when you're 40 years old, even when you're AJ Styles. And so that's really exciting too. What I liked about this match so much was that it was different than any ROH match we've seen so far. The stalling at the beginning, like you said, they build the tension. They kept doing the handshake teases and all that stuff. You just never saw that in any ROH match, and the crowd was not getting restless with it at all because they just were such in awe of these guys, and the guys, were just so good. early on in the show, we would talk about, some of the crappy guys in the ROH undercards, and then you'd get, the Bryan Danielson and low-key matches where you're like, okay, these guys are on another level. Even as ROH has improved dramatically, you still have this very small core of guys that's just on this completely different plane of existence in terms of their talent, in terms of how snug what they do is, in terms of how smooth it is, how logical it is. And, that short list, AJ Styles, Paul London, Bryan Danielson, Samoa Joe will be on it pretty soon. Low Key is on it. I don't even know if Daniels is always on it. But there's these certain guys where you just look at them. But Daniels I'd include in there too. And there's these certain guys you just look in there like these guys are just on another level. And I know you've mentioned it before, but Paul London is definitely on that level, and it's crazy to think that what could have been with him if he had come along a few years later and got into WWE or TNA at the same time that a lot of these other guys did. It's a very regretful what if situation because he was as good as anybody, I think.
Paul London breaks my heart, it's weird because he is getting lost to history, I think, a little bit because guys like Joe and Punk kept their careers going and moved on to places of more prominence. I think more people revisit their early ROH stuff, but Paul London, he doesn't get revisited as much. And even one of my big revelations in rewatching what we've rewatched so far is how good Paul London was. Like, he is better than I remembered. And it's sad. It is sad that he is going to get lost, I think. I think he's in the process of getting lost to history.
Also, well, we're preserving it, just us. we're saving the day. But also, his run was just much shorter than Danielson's on the Indies, even low keys. He just pretty much, it was September 2002 until this show is pretty much his great run. This is pretty much it as far as like the big epic Paul London stuff. And then that's it forever, basically.
That's the other thing I wrote down. He's getting screwed in our honor end of year awards due to timing because I know last year when we did our 2002 honors, I couldn't put him in the top 3 of Wrestler of the Year because he only started really going crazy and really getting a shot in around, like you said, September. But I think I gave him an honorable mention, pun intended. And then 2003, he's got one match left. He won't be on the next show, and then he'll be on Death Before Dishonor, and that's his farewell match. And he won't be on the second half of 2003. And because of that, I probably won't be able to justify putting him on this year's End of the Year awards. Yet, if you took Paul London's September of 2002 up till now, that's less than a year, but just think of what he did. He did the ladder match with Michael Shane, the 3 matches with Bryan Danielson, the 2 matches with Xavier, the Paul at the 3-way with Low Key and AJ Styles, and now this match. To me, that is as good a run of matches as anyone in Ring of Honor so far. That is like on the level of the first 6 or 7 months of Low Key.
Yeah, I'd say better because of the emotional aspect of a lot of those matches.
And because of the timing, like, it just comes in this weird, like, middle of 2002 to middle of 2003. And so he's not easy to say, oh, well, he had a great, 2003. He had a great 2002. He had a great 1-year period in the middle.
Yeah, he's the wrestler of the half year in ROH. Yeah. That's for sure. He's like an early day Johnny Gargano. But I was going to say just a couple of things about the match. I really liked how they went to the leg stuff, where AJ, did his like jump over the guardrail, go for the kick over the guardrail, but London just catches it and just wails him against the guardrail. It was just very creative. Also noticed that London cut his elbow on the guardrail, which is second show in a row that we have somebody getting a bad cut from that.
We should have kept a running tally of all the new guardrail victims because it's probably going to. I know Joe gets to be a victim in the coming show, so
Joe Gagne.
We should have kept the.
Joe, did you ever cut?
I could never afford front row, so I was safe from the dreaded guardrails.
Thank God.
Got it.
But Samoa, the non-Gagne, the Samoan Joe is going to be a victim in coming shows.
Yeah, I see. So I like that. Gabe brags at one point, like he's too involved in the match to talk about how hot Laurie is. Like, thanks, Gabe. I'm glad that you're able to point that out.
True heroism.
He just can't get through seeing a woman on the screen without being gross. It's remarkable at this point. But I love, even London. You said London was sort of the white meat baby face in the promo. He still does like some subtle heel stuff. He just like kicks at AJ's leg. He's just kind of a dick about it, and I really like that stuff. I love the mind games in the match. I love the different holds. And the AJ clothesline, the roundhouse clothesline, that's like an all-time ROH spot. They do like kind of like the holding and hitting, like the Fry Takayama match, and then like they stop. AJ just spins around, hits a roundhouse clothesline, and London goes inside out. I've never seen a reaction to the clothesline like that. That's the spot of the match, I think.
Also, going to something you said about the start of the match. So to kind of elaborate on the start of the match. The start of the match is it's the middle of the match where the leg starts to come into play. Before that, it's kind of just a lot of one-upmanship, and they'll do a couple moves, a little sequence, and then Paul London will ask for a handshake. And I didn't know if that was supposed to be Paul London being a jerk or Paul London just being intense. But I thought it was interesting where AJ at one point refuses a handshake, and he actually gets some boos. Like I don't know if that was the intention, but he's like the first one to not ask for a handshake. I didn't know exactly what they were going, especially like even at the start of this match before it all starts. Paul London's like slapping hands at ringside. He's just being a total babyface. Go on.
I took it as mind games. Like they were just like I got this. Like I didn't think it was like particularly heelish or not heelish. I saw it just sort of as we're playing a game of chess here and trying to psych each other out.
And I guess one other thing I want to mention is I don't know if we have any professional wrestlers that listen to our show, active pro wrestlers, but I'll say this. There's a great thing to learn in this match where there are so many wrestling matches, what the wrestlers do, and it's a one way of doing it, is you start working on someone's limb if you want to work on a limb in the match, and you work on it the entire match. And the problem with that is sometimes is you have big moves you want to do that involve that limb, and you want to do those big moves at the end, and now you either have to kind of ignore the selling or not do them. The thing I like about this match is they saved all the limb work for the second half of the match, and it was just as effective. So I would suggest to some wrestlers, like, steal a page from this match and, do the moves that involve that limb in the first half, and then do the limb story if you want to do, like, a story with an injured leg. You don't have to do it the whole match if you do it well.
And this is something that I've even seen AJ, do like the way you're describing here, where he still is selling the whole match and then goes back to just using his leg. So he knows how to do it, but I guess a lot of wrestlers just decide, oh, I don't need to worry about that. No one cares, but we do care.
I mean, there is a moment where he does the springboard off the ropes into the reverse DDT, and I saw someone online in a review complain that he didn't sell his leg but I think for the most part the selling in this match is good. And again, I think it's easier to tell like a limb story and be consistent when you're not doing it for 25 minutes. If you only have to do it for 12 minutes, you're making it much easier to be consistent for yourself. And I think that's just a great lesson to learn. And this match does not suffer at all. If anything, it's kind of cool that the match changes like that halfway through.
Yes. And another cool moment, by the way, that you mentioned to me when we were talking about it was they were on the top rope, like struggling to hit a big top rope move. And which has sort of become a calling card of Big Paul London matches, like the struggle on the top rope.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that. But then, and the guy they're hitting each other really hard with strikes, and a guy in the crowd yells, "Easy, wrestling's supposed to be fake." And everyone, and like it's just very noticeable and just a really cool testament to the match.
I feel like that must be a fan from 2018 that's time traveled back in time, because like most of the fans in that era would like be like loving unprotected chair shots or something. So like the idea of the woke I'm concerned for the wrestler's health fan in 2003 being like, whoa guys, like lighten up on those moves. It was just a surprise to me. Like, hey, calm down. Even earlier, there's a point in the match where Gabe on commentary says, there's no sports entertainment in any of those headbutts. Like, they were really trying to sell the stiffness of this match. But, yeah, this is a great match. I don't know where I'd rank it. I'm going to save the rankings for the end of the year episode. But to put over Paul London one more time, 4 of my 5 favorite Ring of Honor matches in 2003 so far have Paul London in them. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The other one being Joe and Homicide?
Yeah, from Do or Die.
Yeah.
I think Paul London. I think the two matches he had on the first year anniversary show, obviously the Bryan Danielson one and this one, I think those are all top 5, and hell of a half year, like just amazing. And I'm glad he's leaving, Matt, because I get sad now watching how good these matches are. I get sad. So now that I'm in a melancholy mood. We will move on to, after the match, we get the double pin. The crowd boos at the finish, but then it turns into loud 5-more-minute chants, and London and AJ eventually shake hands to cheers. A fan screams at the match it was worth the price of admission all on its own, and Gabe agrees on commentary. Styles and London take turns raising each other's hands, and the crowd gives them a standing ovation. I thought it's a real testament that the crowd didn't turn on this. Like, it shows how good the match was, that even though they did get a non-finish, and, the thing, from Dave's report, Ring of Honor was scared that this finish was going to get shit on. Match is so good, crowd really doesn't care that much when they don't get a finish. And also, like, it's crazy to think this match was cut short. Like, that apparently AJ and them were supposed to go longer, but because he had a knocked tooth, he went home early. Like,
yeah, I wonder what else they would have done.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
I feel like just aesthetically, the match was good how it was.
Yeah, like
it didn't need anything else.
Yeah, it didn't feel watching it like they cut something out. Like, sometimes you can tell when a match has cut something out. Like, it feels like, ooh, there's something missing here. I didn't get that feeling at all watching this match.
No.
So next, we're going to get Joe. We've overwhelmed you with our gushing over this match. We've had you be quiet for a while, but we're going to need your live correspondent hot on the scene take, because there is something that happened on the show that did not make the DVD, but you were there. So we're going to get into the story of the main event, which was a losing faction must disband match between the Prophecy of Christopher Daniels, Danny Moff, and Donovan Morgan with Allison Danger. And they end up defeating and disbanding the group of C.W. Anderson, Michael Shane, and Samoa Joe in 20 minutes, 49 seconds, when Moff pinned Samoa Joe after when he used a jackknife cradle. Now, originally, Steve Corino, the leader of the group, was supposed to be in Michael Shane's spot. He was not. I will get into why he really wasn't. But apparently on the show, they had low-key do an angle to explain this for the live crowd in character. It is not on the DVD. Joe, can you explain what this was?
All right. So in the very first match, they made a mention that in the main event, the losing groups, Ring of Honor can't stand these factions fighting, so the losing group has to break up, which was a big surprise to me at the time, because live there was an angle where the group of Samoa Joe, C.W. Anderson, and Michael Shane came out, and they called out Loki, who was scheduled to make an appearance of some sort. Loki comes out, they make a pitch, why don't you join the group? And the Prophecy comes out and says, no, if you join them, you'll never get a shot at the title, join us. Loki kind of goes, he says, like, he talks about the what the title means to him. In a funny moment, he mistakenly says he fought for 60 seconds to win that title. And kind of gets this look on his face like, ah, shit, like, I messed that up. And basically what he does, he kind of goads both groups into whoever loses has to disband, which was quite a shock to watch as it unfolded on the DVD, because they just cut a segment completely out of the show, and then Loki took off and we never saw him again. I guess, I don't know, he went to beat the traffic or something. So yeah, it was just odd, because it was a long segment, and this was not a terribly long show. I think with the bonus matches, it went like 2 hours 50 minutes. I don't know if it was really cut for time. I think you could have just kind of edited off some pieces. So I don't know, maybe they just felt it didn't work, or I don't know why it was left off, but it was very peculiar to watch in retrospect.
On the commentary, it's almost like Gabe's making up the stipulations of this match in his head on the fly, because at first, in the early parts of this match, he's like, these guys, whoever was on the losing team might not get bookings again. And then later on, he's basically like, this is basically loser leaves town. And he says that twice. And it's almost as if in the middle of the match, I don't think this is really what happened, but it comes off as in the middle of I'm going to say, not that great match. Gabe decides he's not going to book some guys anymore and just makes up his mind that, well, this is loser leave town. Like, this is it.
Yeah, and I also because that makes sense, because as I was watching it, I was like, this is like the end of this supposedly big feud, and they don't do any promos about it. I thought that was really weird, especially considering that Christopher Daniels always gets a big promo at the beginning and end of all these DVDs, and I was like, that's crazy that they don't have a promo about this big angle blow off. But I guess, knowing everything that happened and how it went down, it makes a little more sense.
So I've done a lot of research on this, so I will give two sides of the story. The one side I can't give is the side of the person who accused Steve Corino of what I'm about to describe. So when I describe this stuff, let's just, in the sake of fairness, realize, everyone's got their own sides to stories. There's two sides to every story, sometimes more than two sides, blah, blah, blah. I'm just giving these people's in their version of events. I'm not saying anything's for sure the truth, but this is what Dave Meltzer reported at the time of the show. Dave writes, the second problem with the match, I skipped whatever the first was that Steve Corino no-showed. He never directly called the promotion, but he did send word through a third party at 10:30 p.m. the night before the show. Booker Gabe Sapolsky was able to get Michael Shane as a replacement, going on the assumption that Corino isn't coming back, and Dave writes in brackets, and in wrestling, that means eventually he will. They had Low Ki come out. Joe asked him to join the group, and Daniels told him that would be dumb, because if he joined with Joe, he couldn't get a Ring of Honor title match. Low Ki then challenged both teams to agree to a bout where the losing team had to disband. Math pinned Joe with the idea that it sets up Math up for a title match on the 628 show in Philly. Word was the six-man couldn't follow Styles in London, and the finish didn't get over as well as noted. So at the time, it was just Corino no-showed. So Steve Corino was one of the most prolific shoot interview guys in wrestling. He was just on behind the Sandman and New Jack and Raven tier in terms of guys who produced a lot of shoots. His shoots I found to be pretty entertaining. So in a later 2003 Ring of Honor shoot interview, Corino tells his side of the story. And it's about, for people who want to go out and find a copy of it, if you want to hear Steve actually tell this, it's like the first 20 or 30 minutes of it's pretty well told, but I'll try and give the crib notes. This is Steve Corino's reason why he did not make the show. Corino on June 1st was on a plane flying back to his home state of Pennsylvania after a 0-1 tour, and then the plane lands in Detroit unexpectedly with the announcement that Customs needs to handle something. They call two people off the plane. One of them's Corino. They tell the other guy he can go back on the plane. Corino's like, uh-oh. And they tell Steve Corino that there's a warrant out on his arrest. There's a warrant out because he has forged a check worth $2,100, and there are 25 counts of credit card fraud. Corino has no idea what's going on here. He had no idea this was out. He is put in, and he's detained, put into prison. On the 5th, he's moved to Wayne County Prison and shackled on a bus on the way there, put into prison in Kentucky, and for 15 days, Corino just keeps getting moved from prison to prison every few days. He is not allowed to make a phone call. He says his family eventually made calls and figured out what had happened to him, but he wasn't able to call the outside world. He says that's just the way he discovered that's the way the prison system worked, which is sometimes you just get lost in the prison system. He said he ran into a guy in the prison that told him he had been in for bouncing a $100 check for 1 month, and they hadn't yet processed him. And Corino says he lost 15 pounds because the food was terrible. He says he did nothing but play solitaire and read a lot of books. They wouldn't even let him have a pencil because they were afraid he'd stab his jugular. He says he felt like he was starting to go insane the last day. He felt like he was caught between heaven and hell because he never knew when he was going to get out. So, I mean, the way Corino tells it, this was a very harrowing experience for him. And it turns out it was an ex-girlfriend, Steve says, and they realized once they finally brought these charges after the 15 days to court, they realized very quickly they were probably suspicious when her claims of fraud went to 2001. And he said quickly they said at first they misread and thought it was 2002, but at the court, when they realized her fraud charges were related to things in 2001, he said you could see their faces change quickly because all the prosecutors realized, like, who would wait 2 years to file a fraud charge? Turned out that a lot of the fraud things were, like, in her name. Like, there was a $500 charge on a credit card to repair a car, but it was her car. And the cherry on top was Corino says that before this ever happened, this ex-girlfriend sent him emails saying that, like, I want some money from you, and if you don't, I can make your life very difficult. And Corino says he saved the emails and printed them out and gave them to the court. So basically, Corino at this point, like, the Dave Meltzer report said someone got word to them the night before. Corino I don't think was able to talk to anyone for these 15 days. At the point of this show, the day of the show, he had been in jail for 2 weeks. And I think he said something like Guillotine Legrand guessed his email address and started contacting people. And yeah, and finally Corino closes by saying, when they ask him, is there anything else he wants to say about the experience? Steve says he didn't get butt raped and he didn't butt rape anybody. So that was something that Steve wanted to make clear. And that's the story of why Steve Corino could not be at the show. He was in jail. Like, he had been in 2 weeks prison at this point.
I mean, if that's all true as it says, I feel really bad for him.
Yeah, I mean, he claims he was going to sue the woman, the Wayne County Prison, Fox 29 and the Pottstown Mercury paper for printing unflattering coverage of him. I don't know if any of that came to fruition, but I do know that the charges were dropped. So whatever it was, the case did not stand up. So with all that being said, Joe, what did you think of this wrestling match after we just talked about a guy going to prison for 2 weeks?
They just announced he wouldn't be there that night. They didn't say he was rotting in jail.
Yeah,
they didn't know, right?
They didn't know, yeah. We weren't filled in. The match itself got exciting near the end, but for a while it was just guys going back and forth. And they finally kind of isolated Dan Moff, but it's kind of weird to get sympathy on a guy who just turned his back on his tag team partner. His nickname's the Assassin. I had a real hard time following the last match. I did like the ending. I see why they did what they did. It kind of made sense to give Moff kind of a big win coming off of his turn. But I mean, just jump right to the last couple of minutes. That's really all that's worth seeing. IMO.
Yeah, Matt, what did you think?
Yeah, well, the finish was interesting because not only did it set up the Moff match, but also it set up the storyline that they've been going with, where the Joe can get pinned by quick pins. And they've been saying that, and it happens again over the next year plus. So I kind of like that they, really are working at that and sticking to it. But yeah, the match had no intensity. It really had no heat. It was just like two heel groups fighting each other, which really very rarely works, even in ROH. And it was weird. It was just like, I mean, I understand now, why the match didn't turn out that great, but it really didn't. It was just so meandering, guys going back and forth, no sense of direction, no sense of storyline. Daniels got a hot tag late, and the crowd was excited for that, and he kind of saved the match a little bit, so it wasn't terrible. But you have Donovan Morgan in there, who doesn't really have charisma. Michael Shane has kind of lost whatever charisma he had shown the year before. He'd pretty much given up, and obviously ROH gave up on him. This is his last match in ROH, right?
Michael. C.W. Anderson's last. Michael Shane has one more.
War of the Wire.
Yeah, War of the Wire.
Okay,
yeah.
So like months and months later.
Yeah. So Morgan, I forgot to mention, this is Morgan and CW's last match. Shane's second last match. So yeah, that's telling in itself.
Yeah. So I mean, a main event with a bunch of guys that the promotion has given up on. The crowd's given up on them. You still have Joe in there. You still have Moff. You still have Daniels, and not surprisingly, they are the highlights of the match. But not enough to really save it. Joe does the ole ole kick, and the crowd doesn't really know that they're supposed to sing yet, but the kick is good. Joe does look good. He does suplexes. They do a good kind of strike fest right before Moff cradles him. But really none of the action is noteworthy at all. It's not terrible because the guys are competent, but it's definitely one of the worst main events they've had.
Yeah, what struck me about this match was I was talking about the Raven match being full of bells and whistles. This is a match that could have used one bell, one whistle, anything. Like
a literal whistle would have been entertaining. Just throw Bill Alfonso out there. Would have saved the match. Somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, like I know from just the background I just listed off, we know this originally wasn't supposed to be the feud-ending match, but the day of the show they knew it was. And even if it wasn't, supposed to be the main event, it wasn't supposed to be a feud ender, it all turned out to be, and you think of like a guy like Christopher Daniels, who's, I think, a very smart guy in terms of plotting stuff. Like, this felt like it was all called in the ring. It felt like there was nothing, there was no, as you said, no extra intensity. There was no, like, if there was ever a time to overbook a match and have run-ins or like foreign objects or anything at all, but it just felt like six guys filling time. It felt like a mid-card match, except it wouldn't even have been a great mid-card match. Like, and I was shocked at how little effort they put in to make this feel special. I think maybe the most telling thing is this is a line Doug Gentry says on commentary about this match. At some point in the match, as things pick up, Doug Gentry says, "This match has finally broken down to where we thought it would be." I'll note, he says this 16 minutes into a 20-minute match. He's basically saying this match is finally getting good when it's almost over. And I don't think he's wrong. Like, it picks up 16 minutes into a 20-minute match.
And I will say also, I mean, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, but in the promo at the end of the show, Daniels basically references that the match wasn't good, like, which I'll get to, but...
Yeah, and also during this match, they almost do, like... Remember, Matt, when we watched the first-year anniversary show and we laughed because the first 20 minutes of that match, Doug and Gabe did everything they could to not talk about the match and just thank everybody?
Oh, yeah, that was the worst main event. But yes, you go on.
Yeah. But remember, during this match, there's a point where you can tell they're so bored by it, they just start talking about what were the good matches on the show we just saw.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, oh, what about that CM Punk match? What about that great AJ Styles match and Paul London match we just saw? Like, they just start talking about other matches because there's nothing to talk about. And, yeah, it's just, I thought Dan Moff was a standout, but that's not saying much. I felt like you could have used more Samoa Joe and Christopher Daniels in this match because, they're by far the two biggest stars in this match. And so I would have leaned on them a bit more, got me a bit more of them.
A lot of Donovan Morgan here.
Yeah. Like, it was also interesting that Gabe tried to explain Steve Corino's disappearance by saying that he's heard that Steve is afraid of Homicide's street crew. So, again, it shows you that, they had given up on this feud. Like, they weren't even trying to say, maybe one day Steve will come back to feud with Daniels. They're putting all the heat on the Homicide feud, which they will pay off. But this is just a great example of what a bad feud at every turn. The feud ends with one of the leaders of the two stables not even showing up for the final match. Steve Corino and Daniels never have a match against each other. Going back to what you said about Daniels' promo later, not only does he bury the match, he buries the feud, basically. Like, this is just... even if Corino showed up, this wasn't a good feud. But man, oh man, did it turn out to be the dirt worst. Just
yeah, it's definitely one of the early black marks on the Gabe Sapolsky's booking record. Hey, it happens, but certainly was bad. It was bad.
I do think that. Oh, sorry. Go on.
I was going to say, to be fair, Corino may have run into some of Homicide's gang during his time in jail, so that could have expanded that out.
The Kentucky contingent.
I think Gabe also kind of learns some of his lesson because I don't think he tries to book as many guys that have full-time Japan jobs in big meaningful feuds after this. Like, if you look how he books Steve Corino, he's very much a special attraction after this. Like, he'll come in when he has a free spot, but we're not going to put him into anything major or long-term. And looking back, one of Gabe's biggest mistakes was building so much around Steve Corino when he had the 0-1 job. Like, you started the Homicide feud, you started a whole stable for him, you started the feud with the Prophecy. Even at the start, Corino said one of the reasons he had to give up the announcing job, other than him not liking Donnie B, was the 0-1 job. And they gave him all these hats to wear when he was one of the guys with the toughest schedules. So just not a great move by Gabe, but they pay their price for it and they move on. After the match, backstage, we get that promo that Matt was talking about. Christopher Daniels is cutting a promo with the rest of the Prophecy. He says that after all that build-up, all the promises of a war, the group couldn't even hold their end up. And I wrote, getting meta here. Daniels tells Dan Moff he hit a home run tonight, and that while Daniels is in the Ring of Honor World title hunt himself, Moff deserves a shot too, and has every right to hold the belt for himself. Daniels says if for some reason Joe escapes Moff with the title, Daniels will be waiting in the wings for him, which I felt was like a little bit... I don't like that because it almost kind of tips the hat that Moff's going to lose. Not that people thought he was going to win, but he's basically saying, well, if you lose, I'll face him next. Well, that lays out the booking plan, basically. The Prophecy all high five and leave to party, but Raven catches Daniels and wants to talk to him for a minute. Raven pulls him aside and tells Daniels that he's a big fan of him and needs to ask him a favor. He says he needs someone as manipulative and diabolic as he is to team with him against Punk and Cabana on the next show. Daniel says it's an intriguing thought, and he's a big fan of Raven's work as well. Raven just says, let's not make this into some mutual blowjob society. Are you in, are you out? Daniel says he's in. So, 2 birds with 1 stone here. We get a little celebration and build up a couple matches for the next show. Matt, did you have any thoughts on this promo?
No, I mean, definitely the most noteworthy thing was how much he buried the match. That you couldn't live up to the hype, couldn't hold up your end of the bargain. I mean, you don't see that too often in ROH where they just bury their own shit, but I guess it was no denying that they had to acknowledge that they knew they messed up with this feud. So, but I did I like the whole, Raven just, lurking, be like, come over here, man, and setting up that match. I look forward to that match. But yeah, I mean, Daniels always cuts a good promo, and I think this was pretty good.
Joe, you have any thoughts?
I liked I thought, what a nice man Daniels is, telling Moff, you did a good job. You deserve an opportunity. I'm like, what a good management style there. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Daniels really, some shows he's really extra heelish, and then other shows it's like, hey, you know what? Daniels is quite reasonable. It's interesting how they they can't really commit with some of these guys to what they are.
Yeah, this is the first. This is not the first time we've seen Daniels actually be kind of wholesome and the voice of reason or the uplifting guy for the guy who's supposed to be the scary cult leader. This would be I don't know, if David Koresh was you know what you need a hug. Well,
I'm sure. Listen. Do you really think he didn't do that?
Well, he gave a certain kind of hug, but that was one of the bad things he did.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Hugs can be insidious, Trevor. No, but I think probably what it is that this is just probably who Christopher Daniels is in real life.
I think it is.
And that's just, it bleeds into his character sometimes.
I've heard enough shoot interviews where younger wrestlers couldn't rave enough about the influence Daniels had on them and, the nice favors he did for them. So I think he's almost like a Bryan Danielson type where his natural kindness shows through even when it isn't a character that he probably should be hiding it, but he just can't help but be supportive.
I also have to say, I don't really think, after seeing that blood feud or all the blood spilled in that, Daniels would be like, yeah, I gotta get me in on this. Why would he give a shit what Raven's doing? I don't know if I really bought that, but maybe he was just a big fan.
Yeah,
he did say he was a big fan.
Yeah.
It did feel, I have to admit, a bit kind of a cool moment that I didn't think I'd like as much. It is kind of cool to see these worlds colliding of Christopher Daniels and Raven and them giving each other props. It is this kind of cool ECW meets modern indie wrestling moment. And I'm sure they had crossed paths somewhere before probably, but I like the idea that they were game recognizes game. You're cool. No, you're cool. Let's team. So... we just have a couple segments left. Elsewhere, Samoa Joe is backstage with another one of his extreme close-up interviews where we see every pore in his nose. Joe says he made the bet and now he has to pay the price regarding losing the main event. He says now the Prophecy thinks he doesn't have the backup he needs anymore. Joe reminds us that he jacked Moff's jaw and hypes their match on the next show, saying Daniels will come later. Joe says, quote, "You've rung the bell, you have been heard, and now you will be silenced," unquote.
Do you notice that Joe's voice in WWE is totally different than the one he always has used before? Like,
he's a lot screamier in WWE.
Yeah, he just sounds like he just sounds like a different person, I think.
Yeah, like Joe here, you can see him on these recent shows. He's shaping like the image he wants to give his world champion, that very calm but intense, like, I'm the champion, I'm gonna kill you, like, you think you have me, but you don't. Look, I have the title. I am Samoa Joe. I am pro wrestling. And yeah, he's cutting great promos now in WWE, but they're a lot more like screamy, like Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar's gonna shit you out, like. So yeah, it's a completely different change, but still Samoa Joe. Yeah, you can see, like, this Joe's one of those guys where you can see the pieces coming together. Some of the moves he's adding and some of these promos, he's getting like 75% to where he's going to end up being. One thing I want to mention that reminded me, Tim, is math promo. The start of the main event, Dan Moff's head has so much tape on his jaw and head to sell that the injured jaw angle, and he tears it all off within like the first minute. But he has so much tape on his head in the first minute, it looks like those old Laurel and Hardy posters where like one of them has a toothache and they have like the ribbon wrapped around their entire head. Like, it's an insane amount of tape to sell a jaw injury that almost immediately all gets torn off.
That's right.
But we end the show with something building up for the next show as well. Somewhere else in the building, Special K, for the second straight show, is trying to get the tech guy to cut the lights so they can rave. He refuses until Slugger tells him to cut out the lights. Special K starts getting down, and they tell Slugger to watch the door for them, but they're attacked by the Carnage crew, including Just Incredible. Loke says that there's only one bastard so miserable that he can hang with the crew, and that's Credible. DeVito says they're going to kick even more ass, and Credible says he suffered through 2 years of being held back, and then the three walk away. And that's how we end the show, with the Carnage crew.
The Carnage crew, main eventers, they're a big deal.
So that was the show. Joe, what did you think? Like, how did you think of it at the time, and what did you think of it revisiting it with 15 years of hindsight?
All right, I just realized I forgot a story from the main event.
Okay, go ahead.
Because early on, Michael Shane like kind of tags in, like he wants to get in, and he goes like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa," to Samoa Joe, and someone in the crowd really starts getting on his case. He starts going, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa," like anytime he does something, and this greatly upset some other fan because he screams, "Shut up, redneck," to the first guy, and the second guy goes, "You shut up, geek." And I'm like, "Oh, redneck versus geek will be the post-show main event." That I always remember that. That always makes me laugh. So that did not really come across on the live tape, but I had to get that out.
That's a good story in the sense that it just started with a guy going, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa."
I love that the call out for that was redneck. Like, rednecks and their love of mimicry. Like, god damn it. Oh.
Yes. As for the show itself, it had the great wrestling match. It had the great surprise and Just Incredible. It did have angle advancement of a sort in the main event, but that was really more of a course correction where you're just taking something that's not working and kind of doing away with it. There wasn't a lot of great wrestling, but pretty much everything was entertaining. And Matt's kind of comparison to like a really great episode of Raw kind of really seemed to hold up with this episode. Kind of all the stuff happening and like comings and goings, and it was a really quick watch. Not the greatest show, but certainly an entertaining one, I thought.
I think it just speaks to how good ROH was at this point. Not everything worked. There wasn't so much that was particularly great, although there was one thing. But just things are working. Like the vibe is working, the pacing is working. The characters are over, and so the show is just good. Like, even when it's not great, it's consistently good.
Yeah, I would say this was a step down from a lot of the 2003 shows, but still enjoyable. And obviously, it had the one great match, but it speaks to how much depth Ring of Honor built up in 1 year, where like a few things went wrong in the show, like the Striker match, kind of underperformed. The main event had its big change. The semi-main event had to have a double pin, and like there's enough talent and enough depth that things can go wrong and they can still pull out a good show. Where I think if the first few shows something had happened to like Danielson or Low Key, like the show would have just cratered. But now they can take a hit and still put on a good show. So I thought that was a big difference. I want to thank Joe again for coming on and explaining, whoa, whoa, whoa to us. I thought the most important thing was going to be you explain the low key thing and your live thoughts, but it turns out whoa, whoa, whoa is the thing that's going to stick with me for the most from this one. I'm sure we'll have you on one day again. Do you have anything else you want to plug other than the shows I plugged at the top of the show?
Yeah, you did a fine job at the start. Twitter is Joe Gagne, Gagne. I'm 10 followers away from 1,500, and that was one of my New Year's resolutions this year. Surely the stupidest one, but if you could help out, I'd appreciate that. I do good tweets. Not as good as Trevor. Matt doesn't really tweet anymore, but
mostly retweets about politics.
Yeah. It's hardcore Sinclair. He's not even selling that joke at all.
Matt, do you want to bookend the show with something like your more thoughts on Sinclair and the socio-political world climate that the U.S. is facing right now?
Oy. I mean, no. You know what? No. It's just not a good idea.
For the best.
Yeah.
We'll see what condition the world is in when we return with our next episode, which will be where we cover Wrestle Rave.
I can't wait to see you. I can't wait to see you as the titular line on that show. Guys, this show has been such a Wrestle Rave. This is the biggest Wrestle Rave I've ever seen.
What if Jimmy Rave just shows up and they're like, Wrestle Rave?
Oh, that counts. That counts.
Yeah, and on that show we'll have Homicide versus Trent Acid in a fight without honor. We'll have the Daniels and Raven versus Punk and Cabana match, and we'll have a wrestling rave. So that should be a episode of the podcast. Tune in next time, and thank everybody for listening this time. Thank you, and good night.